Yeah, good morning. Charlie Hatcher, Commissioner here. I did want to introduce Deputy Commissioner Jeff Aiken, the second week on the job. You may recognize him. We also have David Arnold and Shannon Klonowski. And if we get in the weeds on business development questions, we can ask the Honorable Andy Holt because he's Director of Business Development at this point. So we're excited to present this proposed ag and forestry budget to you. We're tickled to death with the amount of funding that's coming our way, and it's we appreciate your support and consideration for it. And so I was, we're going to follow the slides when we get the. I'm going to try to follow directions and go present this in 5 minutes. I'll just go through the basics. If you need to stop me along the way, you can do that. But I've got the presentation in front. Oh, okay, here we go.
And members, the presentation is on your dashboard.
All right, so you can see this table here. I'm not gonna go through every one of these, but these are the cost increases, and if you'll notice, those designated non-recurring and recurring, and you can see the total column. You can also see the state and federal columns, and also the number of positions over on the right-hand column. Some of these that are very notable, the state fair grant, $9.5 million. There's some big forestry items here, close to $10 million together. A lot of that's deferred maintenance and radio system and supplies. And then you can read down the list of some of these smaller items for a total increase of $21,600,000. This slide is, so we've had a big buildup of deferred maintenance we've got, gosh, somewhere around 400 forestry buildings in the state from an outhouse to a work center. And so we're trying to get a handle on that. All these projects listed are forestry capital projects, and you can see for a total of $12,350,000. Next slide. So here are some department highlights that we're pretty proud of. So the first year of state fair funding to move and support the moving from Metro to Wilson County was $5 million. We've had record levels of funding for soil and water stewardship due to the real estate transfer tax. Ag Enterprise Fund, very successful. The best producer cost share program in the United States, Ag Enhancement, you'll see with record number of applications and investments there. Due to David Arnold and his group, we've had for forestry fires here, and also gives us a little revenue from other states. And then you can see the others listed there for testing of it's a core to animal health lab, the only animal health lab, a state animal health lab in the state, and we want to support it and get it as strong as we can. Okay. So a ton of federal program money. You can see those listed here. We were happy to receive or have allocated to us $55 million on the first wave of COVID money. $43 million and change was distributed. We have a tremendous amount of emergency food money that was allocated through our department too, of nearly $4 million. And then the second wave that we were alerted a few weeks ago that we'll get for $50 million will also go to the commercial ag and forestry supply chain to strengthen that. We have, you guys know the issues in the supply chain, and we're doing our best to increase infrastructure and strengthen the supply chain within the state of Tennessee. And then on the last item there is the 10 or so experiment station upgrades and refurbishment for the University of Tennessee to the tune of $50 million there. And then I wanted to make sure I went over, we are receiving from TVA for the riparian buffer and that's we're receiving $500,000, $50,000 a year over a 10-year period, and that is for assistance for streamside landowners to help restore and protect Tennessee waters. And want to make you aware of that. Now we can entertain questions.
Thank you, Commissioner, for meeting our timeline. In fact, you may have exceeded it. So we appreciate that because we do have a number of questions, I'm sure, and others may be generated as we move along. Before we begin with I go to the list, if you could go back to the first slide and just help me understand a couple of things on there, item 4 and 5.
Okay.
The foreign animal disease testing, if you could just say a few words about that, and the lab equipment and plant for invasive species trapping.
Okay. So there's from
those are static, funds, but
yeah, for the it's important that we support the animal health lab. It's the only animal health lab we have, and through the pandemic, we realized the next pandemic will probably be from animals. So we're stepping up our surveillance for diseases of significance that could be zoonotic, bird flu, swine flu. We're tracking COVID in animals to a certain extent as well. So this is for equipment, personnel, for testing for emerging diseases, for foreign animal disease testing, and it's for a push for the One Health. And One Health is animal, human, and environmental, and they all come together. So that's what that one is. The metrology lab is weights and measures, and a portion of that is for invasive species trapping, but it's the same thing. It's for metrology equipment for the weights and measures lab.
And where's the lab physically located?
It's located on campus. It's a relatively new structure. We had to refurbish that and stand that up several years ago. Julius Johnson was instrumental in that because we didn't have the appropriate equipment or building at that time.
All right, thank you. Chairman Crawford, I believe you're first on my list.
Thank you, Madam Chair Lady. Thank you all for being with us today. According to the questionnaire we sent out to you guys, the department received $55 million and expended only 43 of that. What were the eligibility criteria to receive these particular funds for the USDA supply chain?
Oh boy, where do you want me to start? So we had that first wave of CARES money. The requirements and the guidelines for that changed, I believe, 6 times. And so from the federal government, we were trying to be compliant with that. Of course, the criteria, it's basically a cost share program because they had to have some skin in the game. So they was application basis. An ag and forestry business would submit their business plan, what they were going to try to do, what they were going to supply, whether it was equipment or personnel or whatever, so that they had some skin in the game. And those applications were reviewed with the business development team first, and then they were passed to Horn, the consulting company, to review those, and then awards were determined after that.
Commissioner, can I
Chairman
add to
Crawford.
that? Can I add to that real quick? Hi, I'm Shannon Klinowski with the department. Commissioners made a great point that it was for projects that people were going to do to strengthen our supply chain, but there was also a piece for any losses that businesses incurred as a result of the pandemic. So there were 2 different options in that application.
Chairman Crawford.
Thank you, Madam Chair Lady. $8 million is pretty quite a bit of money, and was there just a flat lack of applicants, or was there the ones that did apply, was there not eligibility for them to meet those standards?
No, we had loads of applicants. We had to work through the process, and there were some that couldn't meet the standard that the federal government had set, and they weren't funded.
And my final question, Madam Chair, is how are these funds utilized in helping the supply chain?
We have, let's see, about 20% of the money went to meat processing capacity. We made great gains in that. We can give you the actual numbers after this. We can get those to you. 20% went to the forestry industry because the forestry industry was left out of USDA's support initially, and we felt like they should be added in. That was a big bulk of the money. So a lot of it went for processing capacity for different sectors within the state. And in the end, it was, in my opinion, one of the best ag and forestry use of CARES money in the country.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
And the dollars, that $8 million that we were not able to utilize because of, didn't meet standards, did that just revert to the federal government, or where are those monies?
No, it went back to the state pool.
Okay, so
And it was utilized in other areas.
All right. And do you happen to know what those areas might be?
I do. We'd have to check with Butch on that.
All right. We're going to see him this afternoon. We can ask. We'll make a note to do that. Representative Shaw.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I got about 4 questions, if you would allow me to ask. Thank
Certainly.
you. And good morning, Commissioner. Thank you for being here and your staff, and thank you for making sure that we keep some bread and butter on the table in Tennessee. We appreciate you so much. I want to begin. I know the department was allocated about $50 million in American Rescue Plan dollars to address the commercial ag and forestry supply chain enhancement. Can the department provide details on how this funding is going to be utilized is my first question.
You're talking about the second wave that we just got allocated?
I'm sorry, sir.
You're talking about the second wave, the second 50 million? Yeah.
Yes, sir.
We're building that right now. I could have, Andy, you want to come up and update them on where we are on that?
Andy Holt, Tennessee Department of Agriculture, Director of Business Development. So Representative Shaw, right now, that $50 million is unallocated at this point. We're still waiting on a few details from the governor's office. But generally speaking, I believe that the CARES Act money, that first round, that $55 million that we got, was used for business disruption and also supply chain enhancement. In all likelihood, there will be no business disruption element to this particular funding. It'll be all focused on supply chain enhancement. And much like what Commissioner Hatcher stated previously, there'll probably be a focus on meat processing. I think many of you all are probably familiar with folks having very long time periods before they're able to have animals processed in a local processing facility, and also forestry, which covers 52% of our state. That's probably our largest crop in the state. We'll also have a concerted effort focused on forestry, but never doubt the ingenuity of farmers in the state of Tennessee. We'll have a number of different projects that are brought to us once we have the final details on that particular program. But I do hope that we can have a focus specifically on distressed and at-risk counties. We also want to have a focus on urban agriculture, and we also want to have a focus on very large projects that would help agricultural producers, either by region or by commodity, help them significantly. So there's a lot of different plans with that money. Once we get the final guidelines from the governor's office, we're able to really put, the bookends on that program.
Well, you pretty well answered my second question, what type of projects you're going to target. You pretty well answered that. But I will ask you in terms of distressed counties, can you talk a little bit about what you think they might get in addition to the others, if that's a fair question?
Yeah, it's definitely a fair question. That's a question that Commissioner Hatcher and I, and also our Deputy Commissioner, Jeff Aiken, have talked about. quite a bit. We need to make sure that we fall within the guidelines, again, that the governor's office puts down for us. But I do think that there's a concerted effort for us to focus on those counties with a portion of that funding. We recognize that our number of distressed counties has come down significantly during the last 3 years. And we hope that with the inflation and other signals of potential recession that we're seeing right now, that doesn't change and doesn't revert and go back up. But what we want to try to do is really focus funding for what most likely will be smaller projects in those areas with a smaller amount of what we would consider to be matching funds. What we realize is that most of the time, and the department has visited every distressed county in the state. When there was 11, I went personally to each of the 11 counties, gave presentations about how the Department of Agriculture can help small businesses with low cost or no cost business opportunities of an agricultural and forestry nature. But we hope that with that knowledge and also with the funding, we'll be able to stimulate some projects in those distressed counties that can help, take that designation away from those areas.
Madam Chair, my final last question, I wanted to ask you, when do you think the process going to begin, and what is the deadline for using those funds?
Yeah, so like Andy said, in the next few weeks, we should have the answers we need from the governor's office. I believe the drop dead is 4 years, but we're going to try to get this out the door in 3. So we have time to send that reporting to Washington.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
And just to follow up, because we weren't able to use all the funding previously, what's the department doing to work with those? I assume some of those applicants who applied before who weren't successful might want to apply again. Is there any, concerted effort to work with those applicants to get their applications up to snuff, if you will, to meet the federal standards and be considered?
Yeah, thank you for the question. And yeah, we have a database of all those applicants. And when we roll this program out, once it's been finalized, we have all the rules and regs that we need. We'll actually go through a process of marketing these new funds, and we'll draw back off of that initial group of applicants and let them know that these funds are available, not only to them, but to lots of other Tennesseans across the state.
And is there going to be like some central resource within the department to help these applicants, figure out what they can do to make their application stronger?
Yeah, so that's the way we operate. We have several business consultants, and they got different areas of expertise. And so, yes, we always do that. We have people that have expertise in meat processing, those that have expertise in forestry. We've hired or be hiring a new forestry consultant. So yeah, we help them any way we can. And some of them have a lot of questions and struggle with applications. So we're ready to assist.
And that leads me to another question. I guess there's a lot of money flowing through the department. Do you have adequate staff to manage those dollars?
Wow, that's a good question. So we've had a massive number or a massive demand for increase in demand for our services through in our pesticides, our food and dairies, and it's up probably 30-40% the number of inspections and things that we need to do. So yeah, that we're going to be looking down the road for some cost increases for some personnel on the next budget cycle for that. But as far as we're hoping that there'll be some kind of the processes that were set up for the previous federal money, the $55 million that we spent 43. Horn was really good to us, and they had some processes in place. They had wasn't software, but they had some things that we can really streamline that. We learned a lot from that first wave. I think that we could do it a better job the second time, but I don't know for sure if we have a robust if we have another firm that can consult with us like that, maybe we won't need more people. But it's concerning because we're distributing more and more and more money. So I'd say there's probably going to be a need for some.
And again, that leads us to the mantra that we have up here. We're dealing with a lot of non-recurring money. And if we start talking about additional personnel, that becomes recurring dollars unless you contract or whatever. So again, just something that we as a committee try to be mindful of. And I know that you as a department are doing the same.
Yeah, and we may lean toward contract services because we're doing that in other areas. We're leaning toward a plan to contract with pathologists with UT, for instance, because that doesn't, you don't have to worry about salary and benefits, and once that contract expires, you're done. So we'll be looking at that.
Thank you. Chairman Hawk.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Commissioner, your team, thank you very much for being here. I must say that it's awfully good to see a guy from Washington County on the team. Jeff, welcome aboard. Tickled to have you, my friend. I want to, Commissioner, if I could talk about a couple of areas of unspent dollars. I have an ag research facility in Greene County. On the last slide there, you showed us that there's $50 million that has not been distributed yet to our ag research institutions. Talk a little bit about what you plan to do there and what partnerships we're looking at creating there, if you could.
So that $50 million, that came from UT through a proposal that Hong Wei Chen had developed because the 10 experiment stations were severely outdated, needed to be updated. It was going to be relatively expensive. So I included their proposal on my list of the original 20-some projects or proposals that we turned into the governor's office, and it made the cut. So the money will be passed through the department to UT, and they already have a detailed plan on where all the money's going to go and what all's going to happen to those experiment stations.
And thank you for that. And we'll continue to have those conversations with the UT system as well and the Ag Institute. So thank you very much. Jump over to another fund, a reserve fund we've got. It's built up $2 million a year, and now it's $27 million in reserves for the bulldozers in forestry. Tell us where we are there. What do we have a timeline to begin replacing bulldozers, and where are we as we're looking to help forestry in this situation, sir?
Yeah, well, that's a great project, and it's put in place so that we don't suddenly have an urgency to replace a bunch of dozers at once. But Shannon can explain the whole process. She's been involved with it, or David can, whoever wants to.
Yes, I'm going to take that question. David Arnold, State Forester, and currently we have 40. The process to get our new dozers has been in place for a couple of years now. We have 48 new dozers deployed on Tennessee's landscape. We have 11 waiting downtown at VAM waiting to be processed and waiting to get our transports to where we can deploy those. We have a balance of 64 dozers that leads to our total of 112 dozer and transport units. Those have already been ordered. The price has been locked in to prevent future escalations, because in this process, the transports have gone up like 6%. Over the couple of years we've been deploying, the dozers 12. So we've been fortunate enough to price lock those dozers in to where we can save significant dollars relative to that. What we are running into relative to our dozers, though, is what everybody else is running into, is supply chain issues. You know, those transports have multiple chips in them. The dozers have multiple chips in them. So we're just waiting for those supply chain issues to work through the system to be able to get our other dozers and transports deployed out in the field. And it'll probably be November of 22 before we can make significant progress on that next 64 dozers to be allocated. But it's mainly dealing with supply chain issues at this point in time.
Chairman Zachary.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, Commissioner. And I don't know if former Representative Holt was properly recognized. I was late, but wanted to welcome him to the other side of the diocese. It's good to have you here, former Representative Holt. Commissioner, thank you. Commissioner, a quick question regarding radio replacement. Last year, we appropriated 1.2 in non-recurring funding to replace radios. Have those been replaced? And if so, how many did we replace?
That's a David question as well. Go ahead, David.
We have actually had 3 phases of radio replacement supported by the General Assembly. The first phase was to get our handhelds, and we've already replaced those. The funding that you're specifically talking about is for our mobile units that go into our trucks and vehicles. And we were waiting for Motorola to come out, or the radio vendor to come out with a new model. They're at the verge of switching over from a current model to a new model. And again, running into supply chain issues there, we are looking at just going ahead to proceed to purchase what they have in hand right now. It will still meet our needs. And then the funding request and our expansion, for lack of a better term, is to help upgrade our network system. You know, we have a network out there of towers and comparators and other radio apparatus that are used so we can have a communication system that works statewide.
One more question, if I could, Madam Chair. And sir, and tell me your name again, sir. I'm so sorry.
David Arnold, State Forester.
David, does Andy Holt play any part in the radio replacement program that you guys are currently engaged in?
Not right now, but if he has some skills he can bring to the table, I'll consult with anybody.
If we could put that on the record, Madam Chair. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, gentlemen.
And just a follow-up question to the real question, not the rhetorical one. The radio system that you're looking at, there's a huge investment in the Department of Safety with the radio system. Will your system be compatible with that? Will your emergency people be able to talk with the other emergency people in the state?
We do have a separate autonomous system at this point in time. It's different needs, different frequencies, et cetera. I think there are ways to make those systems compatible. There'll be some expense tied to that. And I would have to talk with our radio people to give you a more specific answer than that. Go ahead.
I just want to add on to that. I'm Shannon Klinowski. The systems that forestry needs, the safety systems are fantastic if you're on a road. If you're not on a road in the hills and hollers, as David likes to call it, fighting fires, we cannot use them because we can't get a signal. The other thing we found is that all other states in the federal firefighting compact have these same radios that forestry has made this investment into. So when we send our folks out to fight fires in other states or out west, they don't have to reset their radios, do anything different. They can just jump on their system and go. They're compatible with the other firefighters in other states on the federal level.
I believe there was some discussion about that, perhaps in budget hearings last year. But I guess my only concern would be, and I understand if you're out in the woods, it's a different need than if you're working a disaster in the middle of a city or whatever. But there might be at some point where those things would need coordination. I just wondered if there was the ability to communicate in situations that, if fire is threatening an urban area or homes or whatever. So that was my only concern.
Yeah, and there could be a time when the technology is as such where they could be one system, but not at this point.
All right, thank you. Representative Sexton.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Commissioner and panel, for being here. This year's governor's budget, he's proposed $9.5 million for Wilson State Fair. And I was wondering, last year there was $250,000 recurring, and then $5 million non-recurring was provided for the State Fair in Wilson County. So how much of the $9.5 million will be utilized to further develop the site there in Wilson County?
That's a good question. So that number is based on originally Wilson County had a plan with a bunch of capital projects for infrastructure for that site, and I think the total was 14 million. So that's when you add those two together, that's kind of where you get to that figure. But it includes a Made in Tennessee building where all 95 counties will be represented and have their exhibits under one roof. It includes a birthing barn, which is an educational barn for the birthing of all kinds of livestock, probably the most highly attended exhibit at the Iowa State Fair. We think there's great potential for that. There's restroom facilities, there's livestock pavilions, but the goal is to get those facilities where they can handle an increased attendance in an increased state fair. So with the goal, we would like to be in the top 5 state fairs in the country. And, but there's real concern about all these cost increases, how they're going to get that done. So they're struggling and fighting with that right now.
When you say made, does that include things other than just agricultural, livestock?
Yeah, that'll be quilts, jams, jellies, anything that county wants to highlight. Not every county has a fair, and so some of them it'll be maybe smaller projects, but all 95 counties will be represented.
So in speaking about the supply chain issues, price increases, there's no way that we can ever know from one day to the next whether or not we'll be able to get the raw materials and what the cost is going to be. So what do you see it's going to take in developing this site, getting it finished?
Well, that's hard to say. Like you said, with the supply chain like it is, I think they're struggling with that now. So I think once they have plans to develop or start on construction fairly soon, so that they can try to get as much of that construction done by the next state fair. But we'll just have to see. I don't know. I don't have a real good answer for you. But once they start knocking those projects off, maybe they'll have a better idea.
A couple more questions, Madam Chair. How does the counties and the regional fairs, how do they use these grants? Exactly, what's the process?
So the last time there was, you're talking about the proposed $500,000?
Any of it?
Yeah, so there's a proposed, I think, $500,000 of this would go to, it would be equally distributed to the county and regional fairs. And they would use that money. I mean, the pandemic was tough on those. Some of them, it was the only thing that kept them afloat because they had all the maintenance and groundkeeping expenses and didn't host a fair and had no income. So most of it would go for support for the next state fair and all their operating costs and everything that goes with that.
One final question.
And the CARES Act fund, right, go ahead and elaborate.
I'll elaborate onto that a little bit. They're using it for some of the premiums that they're using for some of the livestock shows. They also are setting up more hand washing stations in their fairs, and they didn't have the funding to do that without these additional dollars. It's also allowing them some of the additional costs that they're having just related to the pandemic. So they're able to take care of those with this.
And then there was also, Andy Holt, Department Ag, there was also a portion of the CARES Act funding that was also used as a grant process to those county fairs, because in essence, county fairs had business disruption like some of the other businesses that we saw in agriculture and, the county fair in a lot of counties. And really what I see especially is in some of the distressed and at-risk counties is really a focal point for those communities. So we wanted to try to do all that we could to support those counties. I'd also like to go ahead and go on the record and invite you all to the Wilson County and State Fair. That's August the 18th through August the 27th. So you can go ahead and put that on your calendar, but we'd love for you to see what the State Fair has to offer at this point. It's something that we can be proud of. Having sat on the State Fair board for a long time while I was part of your ranks, Representative Sexton, I got to see the transition of the State Fair from here in Davidson County to Wilson County, and it really did transfer to something that we can really be proud of. And much like what Commissioner Hatcher said, we are shooting to be one of the top 5 fairs in the United States here very soon. And if you step foot on that fairgrounds, it is an electric experience. No matter your age, no matter what you want to go to a fair for, if it's to see livestock exhibited, if it's to ride rides, if it's to be entertained, if it's to have fair food, that's mainly for me what the attraction is. It is a great, great venue. Would really appreciate you coming out, and we'll try to invite you folks out.
And I'd just like to share part of, and I don't know how Tennessee played a part in this, but I know that they did. The USDA, gave they purchased milk and processed it to keep it from, just dumping it out in the field, as they did many other products. My charity back home, it's called Food on Foot, and they contacted us, and we got 200 tractor and trailer loads. This was under the Trump administration, and each box was about $60, $70. And I think it was something around $70,000 per tractor and trailer load. And we gave away, I think it was over 200 of those to our community and surrounding communities and schools and different things. But it's a great program. I'm glad that, the farmers were able to have a place to go with their stuff. The government was purchasing it. And one last thing I wanted to mention, when you had said something about Representative Holt, and if you, got off into the weeds, you'd call him up. Is that because that's normally where you find him, in the weeds, or?
No, believe it or not, he's pretty savvy on marketing type stuff. And so he's director of marketing now, and he's had an agritourism business. So we're counting on him to help us.
Well, I didn't know if it was referring to his younger days in weed, and I don't, never mind.
Representative Sexton, I believe that's enough. I do have a follow-up question on the fairs. I'm all about a great state fair. I remember as a child going to the Texas State Fair, and my eyes are still bugged out from the experience. So no issues at all with that. But I do have concerns if the $500,000 that we are allocating for the regional and county fairs across the state, if that's enough to really keep them up and going. Because as former representative mentioned, in many counties, when I grew up, that was a really big deal, going to the county fair, and it has an economic impact. It has, there's a pride factor. There are all of these things involved. So I think the $500,000 is less than the monies that we allocated for those regional and state fairs, regional and county fairs last year. So, my concern is that, and I've had other representatives, particularly from some rural areas, whispering in my ear about those same concerns. So your thoughts on whether those dollars are going to be enough to actually keep those fairs viable?
I don't disagree. Running a county fair is really tough. I've gone to some of the more rural counties, and a lot of times the farmers do the grounds maintenance, and they can do more with less than almost anybody I've seen. There's other opportunities. We've helped some of them through other sources. They do have the opportunity, I think, for some of the CARES money as well. We've done that, but I don't disagree.
Thank you. We'll take that under advisement. Representative Campbell.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you all for being here today. And I want to discuss specifically the Future Farmers of America FFA proposed budget item from the governor includes $513,200 recurring to establish 6 positions for the Future Farmers of America. And I'm curious about the details of this task force recommendation. What's the rationale behind these 6 positions, and what are their proposed duties? Thank you.
Good question. Thank you for asking that. So the money would be allocated for 6 positions that would be under the Tennessee Department of Agriculture, and they would work hand in hand with the Department of Education. So it's not a transfer. The Department of Education would still be responsible for curriculum and the educational components. And this team of individuals in the Department of Agriculture would be involved with all activities outside of the curriculum. Personally, I feel like it's necessary to put the right focus and continuity and emphasis on the agricultural side to have those individuals in the Department of Agriculture. We have the #1 4-H program, the largest in the United States, and we'd like to have one of the best FFA programs in the country. And I think this is one way that we can do it. The Future Farmers America is a great organization. It's tried and proven. A lot of our future leaders are there. It plays to the ag education component. It's critically important that we bolster that, in my opinion, and that's why that's in there.
In your assessment, what is the status of FFA across the state of Tennessee in the present time?
It's good. They just somebody help me. There was a membership dues thing that we've changed recently, and that's resulted in increased membership. Can you?
I'll be happy to speak to that. The FFA last year took some of the dollars that we give to them, and they paid the membership dues for every student that wanted to participate in FFA across the state. It was the first year that they were able to do that, and it was hugely successful. It's been the record high attendance, record high participation that they've seen in the state of Tennessee. So they are marching in the right direction.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Representative Garrett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you all for being here. We appreciate seeing all of you. Just one quick question regarding technology. There are a number of future technology information system projects listed on you all's website, or yours questionnaire. Which one will be completed this year? And then the question is, once these projects are completed, what, if anything, does the department still need in terms of technology upgrades? Who wants to take that one?
I'll be happy to take that. I'm Shannon
Thanks.
Klanowski. So we work hand in hand with STS. We have a great partnership with them. They handle all of the technology needs for the state. We have an annual budget with STS, and we consolidated a number of years ago. And so it kind of drove the budget for us. The list of projects that we have, I believe there should be deadlines with those. And we work with STS so that they can get those projects in the budget that we have for the department each year. So we kind of prioritize, the department says, look, this is most important to us. This is second, this is third. And STS will take that, they will fit it into our annual budget, and then they will go ahead and just start working down that list. It's a great partnership. It has offered the department a lot of benefits that we would not have had otherwise. We have access to more resources and talented staff than we would have had just being separate and segregated from the rest of the state. So it's been a great partnership. You're welcome.
Leader Lamberth, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'll be brief, I promise. I know we've got to move along to some other hearings, but specifically on the Wilson County Fair, now the state fair, I want to mention one thing. I hope the department will invite everyone to come tour the fair, as I was invited last year. I just happened to be there for another event, and they put me on a golf cart and kind of showed me around the entire area. It is extremely impressive. I mean, I am really glad that we're investing in that as the new area for the state fair, with just a few upgrades. And I know that's in this budget. I mean, it truly could be one of the premier fairs in the country. So thank you all for bringing some good ideas to be able to do that. Speaking of the birthing barn, I will say that my wife and 2 children spent the better part of 2 hours over there watching a calf be born. I've seen animals be born, hundreds and probably thousands of times in my life. So it was not as interesting for me, I'll admit, but for folks that had never seen that, it was riveting to them. And there was a massive crowd surrounding it, and it was live streamed to apparently lots and lots of other people. So I never would have imagined that would have been exciting, but seriously, seeing the miracle of birth was something that was pretty riveting for both my family and a bunch of other folks that were there. So that being said, $9.5 million for lots of upgrades, a new birthing barn. I mean, again, it's phenomenal. The one shortage that was pretty obvious while I was there were roads for ingress and egress. The Wilson County Fair, that's been a Wilson County problem for a while, but since it's a state fair, it's now obviously a state issue. Who has a good answer on what we're doing as far as on that and how we're progressing on making sure we have state funds there for, again, a good points of ingress and egress to get to the fair and out of, because that's one thing that's holding them back.
Yeah, that's been a concern for months through all this planning. We've worked with until Clay Bright got transferred. We've been working with him he's aware of it. Some of those projects are listed on TDOT's list. I think some of them are being moved up, but it's going to take a lot of money to fund the interstate exchange, some of the access, some of the new roads. It's going to take a while to get that done, but it's on our radar. We're working with Wilson County, working with TDOT, trying to do all we can to keep that moving forward.
Leader Lambert.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. And just anything that I can do to help with that, please let me know, because it's going to become a safety issue pretty quickly. That's my concern. I mean, it's not about just having to wait in line or being on the road for a long time out there trying to get into and out of a fair. When folks are coming in and out of there's no way, it is impossible for emergency services to be able to navigate those roads. And I don't mean just difficult, I mean literally impossible. So when folks are gridlocked out there. So that was the one thing that just to me has not been kind of put at the top of the pile and should be. FFA for just a second. I know we've got 6 positions in the proposed budget. I've seen it in my area, just as you mentioned. I mean that, FFA numbers have doubled in some of the schools in my area, which is fantastic. But I would like, and this is something you guys can get to me later, just kind of analysis on how we've cut those positions over the years. I know there's 6 that are in the budget right now, but a couple of years ago, I had someone give me a breakdown of where those statewide positions for FFA were 30 years ago, 20 years ago, 10 years ago. And at least on that analysis, they just continue to trim down. While now FFA, actual attendance and membership for that of students seems to be on a rise. And that's extremely important, I think, for the success of our state as an agricultural power really nationwide. So just something to think about. I mean, I'd love to see those numbers on where they kind of compare over the years, both the membership numbers for FFA, students that are participating, and how are we as a state doing as far as making sure that they've got the staff support there that they need. So anybody wants to take that question, jump into it. I can see now former Representative Holt salivating at that because that's something he's passionate about, and me too. But thank you, Madam Chairman.
There's a lot to be said in the question you just posed, Leader, and we'll get that analysis to you. It shouldn't be a problem. But what we do want everybody to realize is that we recognize the governor, along with the General Assembly, because of the priority that you've placed on funding career and technical education is something that for a lot of folks, not for everybody, but for most folks, FFA fits very congruently into that plan. And that's where, that's where I learned to weld. And that's, a skill that I still possess today that was, developed all those years ago. That was a long time ago now. And many students across the state have also encountered their ability to interact with livestock, lots of different trades of all different types, public speaking, and also political engagement, parliamentary procedure, and lots of other things. We recognize the value of that within the department. We recognize the goals of the governor. We recognize the priorities that the General Assembly has placed on those and helped to fund. And so we hope to make you proud with the transition of those positions back to the Department of Agriculture. I'd kind of liken it to maybe a coal being taken away from the fire and put in the Department of Agriculture. We hope that when we can get those 6 positions back in, we can keep that fire of agricultural knowledge and the desire to continue to teach those skills. And we think that we can do that very well and very effectively from within the department. And that's not a slight at all on the Department of Education. We still continue to plan to work with them hand in hand on these issues. But appreciate your you, Leader, specifically, and your experience with FFA and your willingness to acknowledge its significance. We feel the same.
But to clarify, it's not a transition or a transfer. It's standing up new positions.
And Chairman Faison, did you have a follow-up question on that point?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was just thinking with all the thoughts and talking about FFA, maybe former Representative Holt would like to share the pledge of the FFA with this committee.
In the interest of time, we will ask Chairman Holt to provide that in writing at a later date.
It's actually the creed, but.
Next on my list, Representative Sparks.
Thank you, Chair Lady. Thank you, Dr. Hatcher. I was really impressed that you came out to the Farm Bureau event Friday, I believe it was. And but one of the questions at Farm Bureau that I'd seen with some of these farmers and ranchers here was the Russia Belarus situation and the fertilizer shortage in those areas. Can you kind of expand on what options that are out there and how serious a threat this is? Because I got a feeling that agriculture is going to be the top topic for the next year or two.
No, I think you're right on. It's this supply chain thing was a lot of problems before the Ukraine war, and it just intensifies things. I mean, we get most of our fertilizer and chemicals from China and Russia, and that's going to affect the supply of those. So, we're really concerned about it. So much so that we're standing up a supply chain task force that'll meet before the end of the month. Not because we don't know if we can find solutions, but we want to meet with the industry, identify. We think we know the problems, but let them tell us what the issues are, identify the issues, and see if they might have recommendations. They might have a recommendation on labor, or they might have a recommendation on barge traffic, or transportation. We don't know, but we're going to convene those industry partners and see what we can come up with, and see if we can come up with some recommendations that we're aware of. It. We think doing nothing is the wrong thing. We want to start that process immediately.
Yes, sir. I want to thank Larry Maxwell at Church for bringing this over to me, your former assistant commissioner. Thank you, sir.
Are there other questions for the commissioner or his team? If not, we thank you for that presentation, and we'll take a few minutes now to hear about your expansion request.
Okay. Shannon?
I'd be happy to. I think the commissioner touched on it in the opening.
And just for the record, if you would identify yourself, please.
My apologies. Shannon Klinowski with the Department of Agriculture. And the commissioner touched on this at the end of the slideshow, but we have a proposal, an expansion. It's $500,000. It would be $50,000 for 10 years. So $50,000 a year for 10 years. It's for riparian buffer work. It's coming through TVA. And they would provide some money to help with those riparian efforts. There's a match component that the state will be helping with. And anyone that's interested in participating with, they can get with their soil conservation district. There's one in every county. And we'll work through them to get these dollars out the door and where they need to be for riparian efforts.
Right. Chairman Williams.
Thank you. So the $500,000 is the state's portion of the you communicated that there was a match with local dollars.
There will be a match. And the $500,000 is coming from TVA to the Department of Agriculture.
Okay.
Then the Department of Agriculture can use either USDA funds that we receive to help with the match, or we can use some of our funding that we receive through ARCF, the Ag Resource Conservation Fund, to help match those dollars.
Chairman Williams.
So could you give me an example of what one of these projects might look like in our communities?
Absolutely. You've got a lot of stream banks that may not have trees or vegetation along them. So you get a lot of pollutants that will flow right into that stream without being filtered out by vegetation. So we're looking at planting trees along these stream banks and kind of creating that natural filter, if you will, and a buffer to stop those pollutants from flowing right into those streams and keeping this water cleaner.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Are there particular areas of the state where this problem is more serious than others? Will you have a priority focus?
There's a few watersheds that could use some extra help. So I know the Duck River watershed was one that was listed that we could absolutely help, but we're not going to stop there.
All right, thank you. Are there other questions? If not, Commissioner, thank you. Former Representative Andy Hull, thank you for, it's interesting to see you on that side of the table. And although you usurped Carol's position, we know that that's only temporary because we know who really runs the Department of Ag. So again, thank you all, and we appreciate the work that you do. And Tennessee, agriculture is part of our state seal. It's our heritage, and we want to make sure that as we move forward, and I think if all of the things that are happening in the world, it really goes to show how we need to be as independent as possible on many things, and certainly critical among those is food. So thank you for doing your part to make sure that Tennesseans continue to grow and produce products that we all go to the grocery store, and despite what some folks, think, those chickens don't come wrapped in plastic from the beginning. So thank you all for helping get them to us.
Thank y'all.
Next, we will hear from the Department of Labor and Workforce Development. Commissioner McCord. Commissioner Hatcher has gotten the seat warm for you, so have a seat, and we're Good morning, Commissioner. Thanks for, don't know, we can't see in here, so I don't know if you walked through the rain or how, what sort of, handicaps you might have faced in getting here, but we appreciate you joining us today.
Well, thank you for having me, and thank you to the committee as well. What we would like to do is very short presentation, kind of set context before we go into our budget, and we'll get that started right now, if that's okay.
That's fine. Please proceed.
So in setting context, let's see here. There you go. The pandemic's been 2 years, and we competed with employers for the last 18 months to 2 years on wages, and that's ended now. So the question people have is, why do we have this labor supply issue if that's all gone? And it comes down to, and I won't go through all these bullet points, but it comes down to a demographic issue. And so part of what happened, and we've been seeing this for a long time, part of what happened at the end of the pandemic is the baby boomers left the workforce. And there's not been population growth behind those baby boomers to refill the workforce. And so that creates an issue where you have actually fewer people to work than you had previously to the pandemic. And I need to say it's not going to get any better anytime soon as far as just the demographic and the population. So we'll go to the next slide. So what do you do? The bottom part of this graphic is traditionally what you would see for pipelines to labor and workforce. It's educational pipelines primarily. Those numbers that you look at are not going to get any higher anytime soon. I think our higher education partners have what they call a enrollment cliff, where in 2025, 2026, there's not going to be enough 18-year-olds to fill classrooms across higher education. So it's not just affecting workforce, it's affecting all facets of our society. So if you look at the top piece of those pipes there in that graphic, those are traditionally not seen as pipelines, but you can see those numbers are big. So you look at something like military transition, 200,000 men and women transition out of the military to civilian life every year across the country, not including their spouses. So we need to engage those folks and bring them to Tennessee. You see something like 2 million people receiving public assistance across the state of Tennessee. And the more we can move those folks to self-reliance off of public assistance, the more that labor supply issue is going to get better. And so that's what we're focused on. Before the pandemic, we talked about skills gap, and we still have a skills gap, but we currently have a people gap as well. And so we're engaging the more, disaffected populations a lot more. And we look at it as we can do two things. We can build a common infrastructure that used to not be there, and we can get stuff out of the way. And so, for example, at that bottom, we have about 160,000 juniors and seniors who are in high school who one of the primary issues for them being able to engage in work-based learning programs is that employers were afraid they were going to get in trouble from labor and workforce. And so what we have now is consulting function where we'll go out and help employers figure out what a 16 or 17-year-old can and can't do to open up that pipeline. And the more a young person gets engaged in work, the more good things happen and the less bad things happen. And so our focus is on not just unemployment rate, which has reached pre-pandemic levels, but also that workforce participation, the percentage of the population who are actually engaged in work. And I'll leave you with one more number before we leave this graphic. So before 2 years ago in February, there were 3.3 million people engaged in the workforce in Tennessee. We publish numbers that there are at 3.3 million and change. We published numbers last week that there's 3.3 million and change people engaged in the workforce. 3.2 million and change were actually employed in Tennessee. We published numbers last week that 3.2 million and change are published now. Are engaged, are employed now. So it's the same. Tennessee has done yeoman's work to keep us where we are, maintain this, not lose any ground. But if we are going to grow and prosper as a state, that workforce participation rate has got to go up. And the opportunity in that calamity is a lot because, again, if we engage our citizens economically and engage them in prosperity, a lot of good things happen and a lot of bad things don't. One more slide, and then I'm going to hand it over to Dwayne Scott, our Deputy Commissioner. On the trust fund, we're always interested in the trust fund. And just the high note there is our trust fund is solvent and growing. That is not really the story across the country and some of our sister states, where not only has their trust fund been depleted, but they owe money to the federal government. So they have a two-pronged headwind there. And so some of the decisions that Tennessee made through the pandemic has put us in a position where we don't have to tax our employers or our citizens to rebuild that trust fund and or to pay that money back. Okay, so now we'll get on to the budget, and we'll start. Who is our administrator of the Bureau of Workers' Comp will take that request.
Good morning. As the commissioner said, my name is Abby Hudgens, and I'm the administrator of the Bureau of Workers' Compensation. The operation of workers' compensation requires an enormous amount of data. We get about 90,000 claims a year involving about 500,000 transactions. Each transaction has up to 214 data elements, and it involves $850 million a year approximately. That's a lot of data, and it is critical that that data be correct. That helps the system. It helps us understand whether or not claims were accepted or rejected, the amount of claims benefits that were paid. It gives us information on how well insurance companies are doing what they're supposed to be doing, and it helps us determine whether settlements are made in accordance with the statute. It's also used to help us evaluate the quality of the services provided by insurance companies. This year, we will make our first report card on insurance companies that deal with workers' comp. So all that massive amount of data and the requirement for accurate data has led to our request for a contract for a processing company for the data. And what they would do is they would make sure the data complies with our data elements that are a nationally established standard for data. They will make sure that they have corrected data that's incorrect. Bottom line is they will help our system run much more effectively, and that's the reason we've asked for this contract. Thank you.
Thank you, Abby. And Dwayne Scott will take our next request.
Dwayne Scott, Deputy Commissioner. The labor standards proposal that we have for 2023 is at 220,000. Sorry about it. Can you hear me? Is it good? Okay. Dwayne Scott, Deputy Commissioner. The proposal for labor standards is $220,100, and that's for 3 positions that will touch all 95 counties. These three positions will kind of be three grand divisions that we've established across the state. And these three positions will primarily do inspections, training, and then consultative visits regarding the employment laws that the commissioner mentioned earlier for business out there. We've benchmarked against a couple of other states, North Carolina and Kentucky, and we're very much in line with that. We're moving from 9 to 12 inspectors, and that's the proposal for the 220,100 for this 2023 year.
And we'll finish up with Deputy Denise Thomas.
Good morning, Denise Thomas with the Department of Labor and Workforce Development. Our next ask is roughly $9 million, and this is for virtual education for jail-based learners. The department, during the height of the pandemic, purchased 75 tablets for a pilot project in the county jails in Blount, Grundy, and Gibson counties. There are 24 tablets, there a piece. And the purpose of this was to help individuals to get access to adult education and workforce education, because obviously in the pandemic, our team was not allowed to go inside the facilities because of the pandemic. And so individuals are able to take part in workforce education. There's a digital library that's available on the tablets, and they're able to use this so that we didn't lose any time with folks working on reentry activities upon release. This $9 million would provide for the expansion of that partnership with sheriffs and county jails to allow tablets to be in each of those facilities. This will also allow them things such as related instruction. So for apprenticeship-like opportunities or on-the-job training opportunities, they can take advantage of the related curriculum all from the tablets. And these are self-contained devices. Roughly 2.2 of that is for the purchase of the tablets, the remainder being the programming, maintenance, and contractual obligations related to that. The next ask is for $204,800. That is for 4 full-time staff that will work across the state. These folks will function in more of a liaison role. So as individuals are learning, we will be able to connect them back to our American Job Centers to help with case management and oversight for employment. The goal is to try to create employment opportunities before release. These 4 individuals will be responsible for doing that in partnership with the American Job Centers across the state. And lastly, there's a $5 million interdepartmental request through Department of Corrections. This is to increase outcomes for the adult basic education program, to increase literacy and attainment of high school equivalencies in the Department of Corrections facility. This is in partnership with Corrections, and to expand our adult education program behind walls. And that concludes that ask, Commissioner.
Yes, and we'd be happy to entertain any questions. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Commissioner. We appreciate the overview and helping us understand this, why they're still everywhere I go, help wanted, or now hiring signs. We have a number of people on the list, beginning with Chairman Williams.
Thank you, Chair Lady. Thank you, Commissioner, for being here. Obviously, unprecedented times, as we've said over the last couple of years. Just want to take an opportunity first to say thank you to you and your staff. I never thought I would email one department as many times as we did over the last 2 years. So my apologies to you and your staff, but I'm very appreciative for the work that you've done serving our communities. We know, because we live here, that we're in a great state, but your department's work over the last 2 years proves why. And thank you very much for that. The unemployment benefit system, we appropriated $42 million, I think, for the development of a new benefit system, as you discussed earlier. FSAG also appropriated 61, given just over $100 million in 20. Can you give us an update on that system and tell us where we are in the process of that update?
Sure. We were heading into the pandemic knowing that we needed a new unemployment insurance system then, and on that way, and then it hit. So where we are now is RFPs have been responded to, and we're in the process of evaluating those RFPs as we speak. That's a lot of money, and it's likely that we won't need that, that the 60 million will replace the 40 million, but the market has changed dramatically. And as you can imagine, almost every state's in the market for a new system. So
Mhm.
right now, we'll have a really much better idea of the cost after we evaluate these RFPs. But we have them in hand, and we're in the process of making that evaluation so that we can pick a vendor.
Chairman Williams.
Yeah, I appreciate that. So just to confirm, we can use the federal dollars first, and then the balance of the revenues that are unused could come back to the state.
That's correct.
Okay. I know you don't have a crystal ball. You were probably the guy who has closest to having a crystal ball, but if everything going right, do you think it's going to be December 1st, or do you think it's well into the next year?
It's well into the next year, and
Okay.
I wish it wasn't. STS has contracted, and it's good with a company called Gartner. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Gartner. Part of my background is working in IT for a Fortune 300 company, so Gartner has always been a part of the role, and they estimate for a successful project, it's 3 to 5 years.
Okay.
And we are not, this is going to be successful. The last one was less successful than we had hoped for. Matter of fact, we had a single audit finding for rushing it. And so we'll continue to have this conversation. There's nobody who wants a system in sooner than we do. But it is going to take longer than we would want to. And actually what are one of the consulting firms that is benchmarking and seeing what works and what doesn't is telling us that it will.
Right. And
Chairman Williams.
And finally, on a local issue for me, we had some issues environmentally inside our facility in Cookville. And I was just wondering if somebody could just send me an email later on today and give me an update on where we
Sure.
are about getting that opened again.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Next on my list, Leader Camper.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Commissioner, and your team. On, I think it was the third page, well, the fifth page of your slide on the cost increase. Ms. Thomas, thank you. Let me just thank you for all the work that you all did for us during the terrible time we were having with the unemployment and getting people there, get them what they needed. It was, you guys responded, very quickly when members were challenged, trying to service our constituents, and you stepped in and really kind of brought a level of change there that had some really far-reaching impact on our constituents. So I really appreciate it. But you talked about the pilot project that you all did. So I appreciate what you all did there, and I'd like to learn more about it. In the budget proposal cost increase, you're asking for $9 million, 6.7 for recurring and 2.2 non-recurring for this technology and this pilot program, really to expand across the state. Could you, can the department give us more details on the funding and how to be utilized, specifically the breakdown between the recurring and non-recurring? And then subsequent to that, is there a potential for increase on the local governments for them to participate in this program?
So thank you for your question, Leader Camper. So one on the 2.2, that is to purchase the tablets, and we can get anywhere up to 7,000 to 10,000 tablets. This is the initial purchase. STS has worked with us in the past, even in the pilot, to get the tablets secured. The balance of the 6.7 is for the maintenance for the tablets and all the programming. So we didn't just want these tablets to be in circulation without having the appropriate evidence-based programming on the tablets to make sure that those participating could get the appropriate outcomes. And so that takes care of all the maintenance if something goes wrong. So that cost will not be passed on to the counties or to the local jails. That cost of maintenance, repairs, any of that is self-contained within the purchase of the tablet. So the 6.7 would take care of those costs, any contractual arrangements for ongoing use of those. So that cost would not be passed off. And as far as the programming, we can certainly get you a breakdown of all the programming that is contained per tablet. It is evidence-based program, anything from behavioral to any of the workforce and adult education outcomes that we mentioned, so we can get you a breakdown of that information.
Leader Camper.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I presume it's your goal to have all the county jails to participate
That's correct.
in this program. And when do you think the department might reach this goal? What is your?
So with the successful budget, if we're able to secure the funds needed, STS, as I mentioned, because they work with American Prison Data Systems on the purchase of the tablets, can secure the tablets quickly, and then it's a matter of getting these out to the county jails to put in use. Because the tablets are self-contained, we understand infrastructure across the state is not equal, so this doesn't have to rely on Wi-Fi from the jails or any of that. These have built-in cellular capacity, so we can get them out quickly. So once we complete budget, our goal will be to work with STS to get the tablets, and those will be issued to the sheriffs. Our goal is to get them out as soon as possible. We work with the Office of Criminal Justice Programs, and they send out a needs assessment to sheriffs, and we know that they want them. So our job is to make that happen as quickly as possible.
And if I may
Yes, sir.
just add to that, it takes a willing sheriff as well.
Yes.
I mean, it takes a willing sheriff. And so we're trying to remove all the barriers. And I think the second thing, you'll see a theme through all that we talk about, we're trying to, whether it's work-based learning or whether it's reentry or whether it's military transition, start that transition before they leave their current station, wherever they are, so that we don't lose them in that transition.
Leader Camper.
Thank you. And Madam Chair, this is my last question. How do how's the department planning on measuring the success of this program?
So we have, and that was really the impetus for the pilot program. So we get a report that we're able to produce, and we'll be happy to share a copy of that report with this body to measure, one, the utilization, because obviously if we put something out of this magnitude, we want to make sure it's going to be utilized and is of value to the people participating. Secondly, I'll tell you, in our pilot, we were absolutely stunned to see the amount of utility across the usage of the 3 counties. The individuals that were not just using them, but how deeply they were using them. We track the number of books they may check out, the number of behavioral units that they go through, how deep the education opportunities are that they may take advantage of. So we get those reports, and we're able to replicate those and view those, and we do this on a monthly basis. And so we have a copy of that report. It can get you a copy of that report to evaluate. So we know that they're being utilized. Our job now is to make sure that when we're prepping them for all the work and adult education-based functionality, is to connect that to a job. So that the goal is that because they have the ability, the tablets, to have distance education, is that we can have TCAT instruction through the tablet. So if they're not inside the facility, they can actually instruct. And then those who are incarcerated can actually take part in that class. And so that's all helpful to help with skills training, et cetera, that Commissioner referenced earlier, so that once they're out, they can go directly into a job.
Thank you. And I really appreciate what you're all trying to do to move the needle on workforce. So thank you, Madam Chair. And if you could send that report to the chairman and she can get it to us.
Okay.
Thank
Yes,
you.
ma'am.
Chairman Hawk, I believe you had a follow-up question.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And on the line of the tablets, there's a fine line that we have to balance in terms of an individual's being incarcerated, and we're trying to help them all we can too. Is that access to the tablet 24/7? You mentioned cellular service on these devices. How do we manage that? Is that something that they keep all the time? And are we viewing what they're viewing?
So the sheriffs, the programming, once we get the tablets to the sheriffs, it is within their purview of how often they have access to those. So in some locations, they may have access during certain academic hours that they're available to do that. But the department does not set that or say they have to have 24-hour access, because we want to make sure it conforms to whatever that sheriff needs for that particular jail. So that one tablet can be shared by multiple inmates, right? It's not one tablet per person. The second thing around that is the way that it's structured, they can only access the things that are within the tablet. So it has the built-in security, so they can't tap into anything outside of what's allowable with the tablet. And those reports that we view on what they're looking at, they also have access to see that the sheriff as well. So there's monitoring.
And just to follow up, Leader Camper asked this question, maybe I just didn't listen well to the response, but on the measuring of the success of the project, are we measuring that by the number of inmates who get jobs? Are we measuring it by the lack of recidivism? What measurements are we using to determine success?
Long-term, we would love to be able to see a tie-in with recidivism, but short-term, we're looking for one, utilization, how many folks are taking advantage of the programming that's offered. Second, how much of that program that's specific to an industry sector leads to employment, and not just getting the job, but retention of that job as well. So those are some short-term measurements we'll be looking at.
Thank you. Chairman Todd.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I had a few additional questions related to the correction piece. I noticed there's about $5 million recurring in the budget for interdepartmental revenue from TDOC to increase adult basic education in prison, jails, and community supervision settings, and about almost $205,000 recurring to establish 4 positions as part of the department's reentry preparation efforts. Why do these new positions need to be created rather than the department utilizing vacant positions?
So we have positions that are available right now, but they do
I'm
not
sorry,
have
if you could, just for the record, your name. I apologize.
That's okay. Denise Thomas, Deputy Commissioner with the Department of Labor. So our current positions are annexed to our American Job Centers. They can work outside of the centers, but they're not trained specifically in the corrections work. These 4 positions will go through the Offender Workforce Development Certification, which allows them to have the skill set to provide appropriate case management and reentry transition activities for individuals that are incarcerated.
Okay, thank you.
And so if I can, Madam Chair, add that those positions are federally funded as well. And this would be in addition to that so that we can make those connections before folks, again, transition out and leverage that infrastructure that we already have with this level of investment.
And one last question, specifically, how will those funds be used to deal with these individuals and get them in a position where they can reenter society and be prosperous?
So for the HOSET attainment rates, the average literacy scores that we were provided for the population is 3rd grade for males, 5th grade for females. Our goal would be to obviously create the HOSET attainment, but also to expand literacy. And with that, it's going to take a lot more of direct student support to be able to do that, to work with individuals, one, on assessments that we currently use in the adult education program within labor to try to get consistency in those assessments that are utilized, and how we can get what we call measurable skill gains to see the level of reading and math and those scores go up so we can expand attainment. How we do that is going to be worked out with corrections. There has to be an assessment of what's currently at play, and if we need to go in and provide additional nationally recognized assessments and instruction. The tablets will help with some of that, but corrections uses a different tablet than what's used in the jails. So I'm sure there'll have to be some shoring up of programming there as well. Because this is all theoretical at this point, we're going to have to get in, assess, and work with corrections to come up with more defined ways of which we can get to more HOSETs and more level gains.
And a follow-up on that, it's great that we have these tablets and available in jails and in the Department of Corrections, but I want to underscore what Commissioner Thomas just said and make sure everybody heard that. The literacy level of these inmates is 3rd grade for males, 5th grade for females. That begs the question of how useful tablets can be. If you're only reading at a 3rd grade level, then how are we making sure that those programs are actually, if I'm reading at 3rd grade and you hand me a tablet, what kind of programming can you have that actually is effective only reading at that level?
Yeah, and so we see that a lot in our current adult education program, even though it's not in an incarcerated environment. And a lot of it is work-based education versus really trying to take someone back through a high school or a grade school experience. It's really work-based education. We have individuals now that we serve, and Commissioner shared these numbers, roughly 450,000 plus working age adults in Tennessee without a high school diploma. That number is even higher if you count those outside of working age. But what we do is we approach it through a work-based education model. We know these folks can work, and we know they have competency, even though it may not be in the traditional setting. And so what we do is we try to build on that so that they can be able to work and earn, as opposed to leaving them without any of those skills. And so we do it through a work-based environment. The tablets operate in such a way that we can have the training, the curriculum built at a grade level that's appropriate. And as they learn and matriculate through a level gain, then it kind of goes up. So it's kind of self-paced. So it starts right where they are, and then there's an opportunity to continue to increase that as an individual scores successfully on their assessment. They're able to pass sort of these primary objectives, and then it continues to build. So the curriculum can be catered to a person. So they're not coming in sort of at a 10th grade level if they're not reading there. So the assessments are very important on the front end. So that's how we do it outside in the free world, and that's how it'll be done on the tablet programming as well. And we see some of that in the reports that we're able to pull, how individuals are able to move as they learn literacy, particularly work-based literacy, and then move throughout the system. And we can share that with you.
And if I may add to Jeff McCord, Commissioner, that primarily, and this is not well understood, primarily the adult education piece is a literacy program. We try to get them to the high school diploma because that unlocks a lot of doors. And so the whole mindset there is of a literacy program, meeting people where they are and bringing them up. So it's not something that's foreign, that you're going to run into somebody with 3rd or 5th grade, to Denise's point, whether you're incarcerated or whether you're not incarcerated, and try to build those literacy skills from there.
I'll get on my soapbox for a minute here. We have a huge challenge in the state. The last scores, I believe, 28% of Tennessee 3rd graders were reading on level. That's down from 32 or 3% prior to the pandemic. There's all sorts of research. We all know you can track the children who aren't reading on 3rd grade level, and they're going to be the inmates in our jails and prisons. So we have got to do better as a state. And I hope that that's part of what we'll be focusing on with the new education funding. But we cannot lose yet another generation of kids who cannot read. And if you can't read, then there's so many doors shut to you. If you can read, then you don't have to have a college degree. There are ways to learn, but you have to be able to absorb the material in order to do that. So it's this group, as we discuss here, and when we talk with our friends from the Department of Education as we're looking at the new funding formula, I just really hope that everybody will keep in mind that the main thing, as my friend across in the other body says, keep the main thing the main thing. And for Tennesseans, making sure that our kids can read, that's got to be the main thing. And we have failed a lot of children, and we have got to change that. So I'll jump down off my soapbox now. And Chairman Whitson, you're next.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I appreciate it. Commissioner and your team, thank you all for all your help with our constituents during the past 2 years. It's been great. Especially I want to recognize Tia, our legislative liaison. She was absolutely fabulous, responsive, accurate, and we could not have functioned without her help and support during this, okay?
Could not agree more. Yes, sir.
Commissioner, and y'all mentioned briefly about reentry, especially from the military folks, and how y'all intervene before they leave. Can y'all go into more detail for that for me?
So we're actually building that right now, because it's not just up to us, it's up to the military side too. And we're making efforts, especially we're going to start with Fort Campbell. And I'll let you talk about some specific things there to start the training. And we have a partnership with Kentucky to do that. We want them to come here to work that, but we're going to continue to build upon that. I mean, So how do you recruit? Here's the jobs we have, here's the place you get to live, and that sort of thing. And we're working towards that. But specifically, Denise can comment on some specific things that we're building upon.
Yeah, so I'm quite proud to say our department for an extremely long time, over 20 plus years, has had a presence out at Fort Campbell. Even when this was not the norm across the nation, Tennessee maintained a presence. Our Department of Labor maintained a presence there. So every transitioning service member out at Fort Campbell, we touch them. We give them information on our labor market, where the jobs are, and quite frankly, try to make a pitch and a sell so that they will call Tennessee home. With that information, it allows us to be able to connect them wherever they may go. If they decide to live outside of Tennessee, can't imagine why, but we will connect them wherever they are. But if they choose to remain here, there's a survey. And typically it runs about 60% of those folks say they want to stay in Tennessee. So we collect data and we'll connect them to wherever they may decide to live, if it's east or otherwise, and with employers that are hiring there. We're also working specifically with Fort Campbell on their career transition programs to make sure that we can get some of the transitioning service members in apprenticeship type programs. Also making sure we can crosswalk their experience over to lessen the amount of training an employer may have to do for them. So there's also a lot of direct engagement that's done. More recently, our local board, there's investing roughly $400,000 to shore up on-the-job training and other programs, so employers will be able to get those transitioning service members working for them in advance. We do know, in addition to those that are at Fort Campbell, before they leave military service, we do have service members across the country that come to Fort Campbell to train. We have an opportunity also to work with them as well to get them into jobs. So we have staff that's working to connect them each and every day, but we'll also be seeing more of a connection between apprenticeship type programs and some initiatives we're working on to get those soldiers in, not just the skills trades, but also sort of the non-common areas of apprenticeship, such as IT and healthcare, because we also see that being a big need as well.
And so if I may too, to add to Denise, there's 400 service members who transition out of Fort Campbell every month, not including their spouses. So that number is good, but we want the whole 200,000. And so part of what we're doing here is to leverage across other areas as well, no matter where they're coming from.
And I understand you do have to work with Kentucky, but for the record, Fort Campbell, most of the combat power is in Tennessee, is just that the flagpole is in Kentucky. And that's why they call it Fort Campbell, Kentucky. Thank you, Commissioner and staff.
Thank you. And I apologize. I had to step out, so I'm going to go back and maybe ask things that were answered in your presentation. And if so, I apologize in advance. But on your first slide, when we're talking about the labor shortages and the reason for those, one of the things that you mentioned is a large increase in disability rates. Is that COVID related?
It is, and that's a national, this is a national, not just specific to Tennessee, but yeah, this disability rates have been rising, and there's a plethora of reasons for that. But they have been rising. So it's another headwind on moving people to work.
And are those permanent disabilities, short-term?
That would include all. That one bullet point is just, we see these disability rates raising, and it's another of a bunch of different reasons why we're seeing decreases, or at the very best holding steady on labor force participation across the country.
And what, if anything, are we doing or can we do? Even though I might be disabled, that doesn't prevent me from doing some jobs. So what are we doing to connect some people who might have disabilities with job opportunities that they might be capable of performing?
That's absolutely right. And I'll kick it to Denise one more time.
Yeah, so we have longstanding partnerships with vocational rehabilitation, who is a part of our American Job Center network. And the goal for that program is to connect people to work. We've also worked with several of our local boards that have the Ticket to Work program, which will allow individuals that are collecting disability to work without any punitive impact on what they're earning, on their disability earnings, so that we can get them acclimated. Have to give incredible kudos to Department of Developmental and Intellectual Disabilities that we've also are working with as well, because we know they have individuals that are ready to go to work. part of our job is through our business services team is to have a unified approach so employers will be able to hire those folks. And VR can make the appropriate accommodations needed for certain occupations. So we are working with them, but we would like to see an expanded ticket to work participation.
Thank you. And also, you mentioned on that first slide, significant drop in the labor force participation of 16 to 24-year-olds, which, there's no lack of opportunity for entry-level jobs. So what do you attribute that, and what, if anything, is the department doing along with, interdepartmental efforts with education and other folks to get people in the workforce and just to see what it's like to earn a paycheck?
Right. And so what we attribute this to is somebody has to be taking care of them. So that's a large part of it. And that the intrinsic value of work was never introduced. And it's not primarily our area, but it is a workforce development area. The key, and I agree with you wholeheartedly, third grade reading level and a 16-year-old having some sort of work experience and everything gets better. And so those work-based learning programs, that 160,000 juniors and seniors having an ability to go to work and work while before they get out of high school and understand not just the paycheck, but the self-respect and the pride and what work is. And you go and you have that informal family that helps you do the right thing. All that thing is to introduce kids to work earlier than they are now. And so to try to turn that 16 to 24 age bracket around is critical. And to introduce, I think most of us learned how to work when we went to work. And to introduce that as part of a system-wide change, not just an added thing, but a system-wide change to introduce kids to work is truly, truly important. And being invested in by Commissioner Swin and her folks, and we have each other on speed dial, no problem with that. And again, if we're a barrier for employers doing that, we work to remove that barrier so that they can expand those programs. So that's a key one when we think about not just labor and workforce, but the workforce development system as a whole to get those kids involved in work.
And my final question, what you've alluded to there, it's somewhat akin to turning the Titanic around. It's not a short-term fix. And you mentioned earlier the new technology program that you're working through, STS, the 3 to 5 year implementation or to fruition kind of date. So what are we doing in the meantime? I'm praying that we don't have another outbreak or any other situation that would cause a lot of loss of employment. But if we did, what are we doing to make sure that the system, I know we're all very grateful for Tia and the work that she did, but it indicated a broken system in that we had to call Tia so often. So
fair enough. And so let me answer the first one. So it is Titanic on the workforce, but really 3 or 4 years with kids going to work and things can start changing if we really invest in that. Just like third grade reading level, you can start seeing that. So we learned a lot. We went into the pandemic with a system that we were asked for you to give us money so we could improve and or change. But our processes around that system got significantly better. Everything from how we utilize call centers to how we have our customer relationship management system. So we are in a lot, and how to scale. Part of the issue we had at the outset is we had at the lowest federal funding level that we have because unemployment rate was so high, and then it went to the highest. And so not just the magnitude, but the suddenness combination created all kinds of issues. If we were to have another pandemic like this one, we're in a lot better position to make make it through and with lessons learned, and we'll do that whether we have a pandemic or not. So service will get better. Hopefully we won't, but if we're going to do this right for decades to come, then we need to invest the time to do it right. And if something comes to us where we have to adjust like we did before, we will adjust like we did before. And one thing I do feel the need to say, you can't really judge what happened unless you judge it in context. And how you judge it in context is to see how other states fared. And I am confident in saying that Tennessee did in the top 5%, maybe higher, and how we made it through. It didn't feel like it, and it took your help to get us there, but it was bad all around. That's you don't ever want to be the best of the worst, but in context, this was a unique thing that happened that there's nobody who just skated through. Everybody felt that pain, and I will say too, we came out on the other end of it far better than many of our sister states.
Well, I appreciate that. I used to work for a large company, and we prided ourselves on 98% satisfaction in certain areas, and I always thought that's really great unless you're in the 2%. And that's kind of where we are with the unemployment. If you were one of those folks who weren't able to get your benefits and you had hungry children at home, then, I doubt they care very much if Tennessee was best of the worst or
Agreed.
worst of the worst.
Yeah.
So I appreciate the fact that we are hopefully on a parallel track while we wait for this new system to be developed and implemented, that we're also taking lessons learned from the system that we have to deal with until then, to make sure that should we, and again, we all pray not, but should we have some kind of similar situation, or even on a smaller scale, that we would be able to take those lessons and apply it and do a better job for the citizens of Tennessee. I think sometimes when we're up here and we're talking about these holistic numbers, and we're talking about multi-millions of dollars and billions of dollars, it's easy to forget that those dollars represent real people with real problems, and that they're individuals who are impacted either adversely or positively by the decisions that we make. So again, I'm on my soapbox today. I apologize that you have to be the recipient. Are there any other questions for Commissioner McCord? Seeing none, thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing your budget and answering our questions. And we are going to move on. We have next our TDEC department, and I believe that they are in the house. So we'll ask them to come up and okay, I'm sorry, I thought I saw the TDEC folks. Mill about smartly while we find our TDEC presenters. It's your lucky day. You get a 10-minute break. We'll see you back here at 11 o'clock. We're going to ask the commissioner to come forward, and we're going to ask for those members who are wandering around in the various places in the Cordell Hull building to rejoin us, please. Yes, it's time to quit milling around smartly and come to sit in your seats. We wouldn't want to have to send the sergeant at arms on a snipe hunt for missing members. Commissioner, still morning. Good morning. I just came from East Tennessee, so we're already in afternoon there, but in deference to where we physically sit and the fact that it's not this time next week when we will all have to spring forward and we'll be even sleepier. Welcome
Good
to
morning.
Finance, and we would ask that you would just get right into your presentation, please.
Can I give good morning, Madam Chairman, Vice Chairman Baum, and committee members. I am David Salyers, Commissioner of TDEC. Can I give just about a 1 or 2 minute overview of some things before we get into questions, Madam?
Certainly, you have at least 5.
Okay. I'll stretch that out a little bit, yes. But certainly I wanted to, with me today are Deputy Commissioner Jim Bryson, Deputy Commissioner Greg Young over our Bureau of Environment, and our Budget Director, Scott Grammer. And certainly want to thank you for the opportunity to talk about our FY23 budget request, and we look forward to working with you throughout this entire process and for next year as well. Governor Lee, in his State of the State, talked about Tennessee being America at its best. I share that belief, and it's true. And I also believe that right now TDEC is at its best, and we owe much of that to the close partnership and common vision with the members of this committee. And I want to thank those for a lot of the great input that we receive throughout the year. When our department is at our best, our work contributes to our economy and the overall quality of life in Tennessee. And we make those contributions through our efficient and effective environmental programs, our world-class system of parks and natural areas, and our customer-focused, solutions-oriented workforce. The governor's recommended budget reflects his vision for Tennessee as America at its best and includes items I'll discuss today that we believe keeps TDEC at its best as we seek to ensure a safe and clean environment, great recreational opportunities, and protection of our natural and cultural resources. On our first 2 slides, they show the FY23 recommended budget items. And in the interest of time, I will certainly not go over them individually, but they are vital to our department and reflect budget priorities identified earlier. However, I do want to highlight a couple of items before answering questions from the committee. First, our department's commitment to economic development in and around Blue Oval City. In addition to the work on the site itself, it's expected that the area around the mega site will also continue to develop and attract businesses, as well as new housing, community infrastructure, and a variety of amenities. We've requested $13.4 million in funding for new positions and for the ongoing work that's going to fundamentally change this area in West Tennessee. The new positions are going to be spread across our Division of Water Resources and Air Pollution Control to help with the very complex permitting process, inspections, air modeling, stormwater and sewer plan reviews, and other related work. The largest part of those funds support stream and wetland offsets should it be necessary for TDOT and local governments as infrastructure develops around the site. And second, independent of Blue Oval City, the rest of Tennessee is seeing record growth and an increase in the pace of economic development. Work in our sub reflects this growth. It serves the construction and real estate industries and all residents, particularly rural residents, with septic system construction and repair requests and other related services. Permit issuance and associated system construction oversight are a critical component to growth in areas that are not served by public sewers. Quality-driven services are critical at the time of permit issuance and system construction. and inspection, since they have tremendous bearing on the long-term performance of the system as well as overall customer satisfaction. Program demand has steadily increased over the past 8 years, with the most significant increase in this work of 33% in permitting in fiscal year 21. And to meet this demand and to continue to help serve vital industries in our economy, we've requested 14 new positions and associated funding for these, plus 4 vacancies that are going to be transferred to the program. At this point, I'll defer to the will of the chair and the committee as to whether or not you'd like to discuss other line items that are in our slides, or we're happy to entertain questions. Madam Chairman.
We will let members ask questions as others pursue the line items, and we have some questioners already on the list. We may discover others as we go through. First on my list, Chairman Whitson.
Thank you, Chair Lady. Again, great seeing you guys there, and appreciate all y'all do. What, from pristine to benzene? Is that the?
Yeah, that is the 2 nicknames of our bureau, sir. Yes, sir. Pristine and benzene.
So how did I get labeled benzene? I think your buddy there. So listen, y'all created, especially on the state parks, y'all created just great memories for me and my kids and stuff over the years. And I've been from one end of the state to the other, all 95 counties. I always stop at the state parks. And you know, in the Army, we call it command climate. And you can tell the people love working there, and the commissioner, they all love it when you come and hire within. And I think that really generates loyalty. And I hadn't been much on the benzene side, but you know, I know y'all do a great job also. Listen, my question has to do with local parks acquisition fund that has grown from 30 million in 2019 to over 41 million in 2021. These funds are used only for grants to local governments to purchase lands for parks, greenways, trail developments, and capital projects in parks. Is the increase in the fund due to revenues outpace the number of annual grants that are awarded, or is it there have been a decrease in the number of applicants?
Thank you, Representative Woodson. I'll take that real quickly. First of all, thank you for your support of our state parks. Particularly, I know last year you carried one of our bills that helped our rangers significantly in making sure that they had the kind of law enforcement opportunities and protection that they deserve. So we really appreciate your support. To answer that question, that's the State Lands Acquisitions Fund, and that fund comes from real estate. Is taken out of real estate taxes, which, as you know, real estate has been going crazy. So a lot of that increase has been because of the money coming into that fund. So we've had a lot of money coming into that fund. We're very, very careful and very judicious about land that we purchase. And so there's a process that we go through that takes time. So we have not been ramping up the purchase as fast as the taxes have gone up. And that's why that has gone up, why the balance in the fund has increased. We will continue to be judicious and strategic about lands that we acquire. That fund particularly will be used. We have some of that fund set aside specifically to finish the Cumberland Trail, which is a trail that goes through 11 counties in the eastern part of the state, mostly along the plateau, goes all the way from near Chattanooga up to the Cumberland Gap on the Kentucky line. We hope to be able to finish that over the next 2 to 3 years if we can. There's still a lot of acquisition that needs to be done, but some of that has been set aside to make sure that we do not run out of funds for that state priority.
While we're talking about state parks, we have had a lot of consternation and concern about swimming pools in state parks. Can you speak to that, Commissioner Bryson?
I'd be glad to, Madam Chair. I appreciate the question. It is something that has been very difficult for everyone that has been involved in this. Over the last 2 years, because of COVID, pools all across the state, including the community pools at state parks, have been closed. So that's been a condition we've dealt with over the last couple of years. During that time, we took the opportunity to look at our pools and to say, what's kind of status, what's the shape of our pools? And what we found is the average pool in our state parks is 50 years old. We also found that in order for us to reopen those pools, it was going to cost us $10 million. And then the state parks were going to lose up to $750,000 a year if we do reopen the pools. So we looked at the pools as well, are they being visited? Is this a state service that is being used and improved? And what we found was that overall our state pools have lost about 25% of their visitation pre-pandemic. Before the pandemic hit, they had already lost 25% of visitation. A lot of different reasons for that, which we can get into if you'd like. But the visitation had gone down. So we looked at our pools according to what it was going to cost to reopen them, what it was going to cost to operate them, and what the visitation trends were. And so the decision was made at that point that what we would do is that we would, there would be some pools that we would not reopen, but that we would reinvest in those parks and other services that the community could use. And so that is the strategy that we have been working on following is to reinvest some funds in those local parks where the pools will not be reopening. We are reopening some pools. That doesn't get said very often, but there are pools that are reopening, some of those that are most visited. And so that's where we are. That's what we're doing. We've actually had at least one of our pools that we talked to the county about taking over the pool. And the county looked at the numbers, looked at what we were doing, and the county actually decided that we were correct and that it wasn't a good opportunity for them either. So I think this has been a very difficult process, and I appreciate the question and the opportunity to be able to explain a little bit about it.
And just for the record, how many pools are actually being closed? The microphone, please.
Thank you. Currently, there are 10 that are not being reopened, 5 that are being reopened, and 1 that we are reevaluating currently.
All right. If you would, as that process continues, if you would just keep us updated, because there is a lot of concern and interest.
I'll be glad to.
in
Well, I
this
need
body
to.
about those.
When you say keep your office updated, ma'am?
Yes, please. And
I'll be
we'll
glad to do that.
share with the committee as a whole. Chairman Todd.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If you don't mind, in the interest of time, if I can go back and forth with them a little bit. This is one of my favorite departments to talk with and to deal with. Started a career there, and I've always appreciated your role in our state in keeping our resources protected and taking care of our citizens and what they desire. In the governor's proposed budget, there's an included $13.4 million that you just referenced a few minutes ago for the mega site related issues. And I guess got a couple of questions about that. What necessary infrastructure, if any of this is infrastructure related, would this actually go to support? And then for environmental readiness, and then how will that funding exactly be utilized primarily?
Okay, yes, Chairman Todd, I'll take a stab at that one. And there are 37 positions there. The vast majority of those are Division of Water Resources. There are 6 for air pollution control. And anytime you have a facility such as Blue Oval City, with all the different components of that, we have been performing air pollution control permitting for months, weeks now, and that's really taken away from a lot of the other work that we have to do in the other portions of the state. It's very, very complex work. So the biggest majority of those positions are associated with the mega site itself, with a little bit of peripheral work from the development that's going to occur off site. The other positions being Division Water Resources. If you think about Blue Oval City, and then you think about West Tennessee, the roads, the culverts, the subdivisions, this is a rural area. There's going to be a lot of folks served by septic systems out there. It's a very complex location to do evaluations, to site septic systems because of the soils. And then when you look at the wastewater and drinking water infrastructure, crossing streams, wetlands, things like that, there's going to be a lot of additional related work associated with that. Now, many of these positions over the long term will be fee funded as we're up and running and we catch back up on that. But right now it's necessary to get that work going as quickly as we can. And many of our septic tank inspectors, it takes about 6 to 12 months to get them fully trained up, so they're capable of going out and doing the work themselves. Hopefully that answers your question.
Certainly not enough Paul Brawleys standing in the wings. I know we need more of him. So I appreciate that explanation because I could see maybe an increase of a small number of folks that would watch the construction and watch the developments and from an inspection standpoint, but certainly the ongoing permitting that makes a lot more sense. And I would assume that later on down the road, if we're talking about 5, 10 years down the road, as that begins to kind of level out, that those positions as they become vacant would probably be eliminated, I guess. That's probably the natural process.
Through attrition. Yes, sir. Last year we cut 77 vacancies. And so, yes, as those positions become no longer necessary, then they would be cut as a part of that. However, if Tennessee keeps booming like it's booming, who's to say?
May need them somewhere else.
Chairman
Deputy
Todd,
Gunn,
if
yes,
I
sir.
may elaborate on that, I think that's a great question about the positions associated with the mega site. And I think the use of the term mega site's a little bit of a misnomer. What we're talking about in these positions and these this type of work is really the entirety of West Tennessee and the result of the growth from the mega site that's going to probably be 10, 15 years ongoing. So just to add some context there, it's really a regional high growth projection that will occur for years.
Thank you for pointing that out. I was gleaning that from what the commissioner said, but I'm sure others may not. But having worked in that, I could certainly understand that, and thank you for that clarification. Alternative work site opportunities. So I've been curious to see, and I haven't looked through all the details of the budget yet, but with AWS and so many of your folks working from home, what kind of reduction, and you may not have an exact number, but if you have a ballpark of what kind of reduction in cost associated with office space and those type things are we seeing in this proposed budget?
Yeah, I would. Yes, sir. I would love to speak to that. In calendar year 23, we think probably July to December, we will be moving from the Tennessee Tower to Davy Crockett Tower, and we're projecting about a 30% footprint reduction at that location. And it is a bit more complicated. We have an IT modernization project going on at the same time, which we're calling TDEC modernization, because we are trying to modernize the workforce for the future. So we should see a 30% savings in our cost out of the Tennessee Tower, which we have about 800 to 900 employees in the tower right now. And coupling that with IT modernization, making work in the field, our inspectors having their documents, there on hand in their tough books, makes it so much better. And I can say, while I did note that the number of our septic tank inspections and permitting has increased dramatically. And I can assure you, this is where we hear from the General Assembly more than anywhere else in our department. I would say it's like, where's one of my constituents doesn't have their septic tank on time. But one of the things that we have seen is a huge gain in efficiency in parts of our departments where we are going to alternate work solutions. So the significance are going to be significant savings are going to be significant. I don't think I can give you an exact number on that right now. I would have to get back to you on that.
And I'm assuming that includes all of your field offices.
Every time we have 9 field offices, and every time a lease is renewed, we are reevaluating that lease and trying to find opportunities to gain efficiencies there as well. Yes,
Okay.
sir.
Thank you. And I think it's a good idea what you've done with the phones, because it used to, and not too long ago, every employee was kind of tied to a landline phone at their desk. And if they were out anywhere, they didn't get a message, and it might be days before you'd get to check messages. And so this, having cell phones and having them more mobile, I think can provide better services for our neighbors. So I appreciate you doing that. And just one last thing, I've told you this many times, all of you and your deputy commissioners, that your staff does a great job, and certainly your liaisons and what they bring us and how they share with us. and how they inform us, which is so critical in this process. They do a tremendous job. So just wanted you to know that. And it's great to work with each one of you as well. Y'all do a fantastic job. Thank you.
Just to follow up, while we have some discussion underway about the mega site, we asked this question of your counterparts in TDOT and got an unequivocal no. But is there any reason for concerns? We have a battery facility going on this mega site in West Tennessee. We have an aquifer underneath that property, and that provides water to at least 3 states. Are there any concerns about environmental problems, and what is TDEC doing or going to do to make sure that any materials associated with that production or with those batteries after the life of the batteries, that they are taken care of properly so that we don't have impact there or any other part of our state?
Madam Chair, being a geological engineer and loving to study the Memphis Sand Aquifer, I could talk about this ad nauseum. I will not. I saw the thank you coming. No, there's no threat from the mega site for that. I mean, you'll hear West Tennessee is one of the greatest recharge areas of the Memphis Sand Aquifer. The mechanisms by which that aquifer is recharged are fairly technical. I have absolutely no concerns about the mega site for contaminating or reducing recharge to the Memphis Sand Aquifer.
And will TDEC have oversight of that property to make sure that as construction and production, as we move through those phases, who's going to be the watchdog?
I would say for the most part, TDEC is the watchdog on all the regulatory programs, the air, the surface water, groundwater, and we work collaboratively with University of Memphis and other partners, including Farm Bureau in West Tennessee, to keep an eye on, protect that aquifer. It is one of the most prolific aquifers in the world, a tremendous resource for Tennessee.
Well, one of my heroes was Ronald Reagan, and a famous phrase of his was trust but verify. So we're going to rely on TDEC to trust but verify that all things are happening appropriately at that site. Next on my list, Chairman Baum.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Commissioner Salyers, the proposed budget has, I believe it's $40 million for, I guess, remediation of contaminated sites and $9 million for remediation of orphan sites. Do you have a count of how many of these types of sites there are in the state?
If I may, Chairman, my name's Greg Young, Deputy Commissioner for the Bureau of Environment. I'll try to answer your question there. Just the basic numbers right now of the sites that we're looking at. There's 10 million that's obligated for what are called National Priority List sites. We believe there are 19 of those in Tennessee. And for the there's another 30 million that's been obligated, what we call GASB 49 sites that are contaminated but don't rise to the worst of the worst level that you find in the federal Superfund. We have estimated 29 of these sites. We are actually really excited about having this funding because we believe that we will I think we can get well on our way to cleaning up all those 29 sites, or at least we're estimating about 75% of them. We can get underway with this infusion of money. So
That was going to be my next question. How far will this money go? How many of the sites will they clean up? You think about 75%?
That is exactly what we are estimating. Now, in full transparency, some of these sites have been ignored for a while, and so we need to get updated information, testing, that kind of thing, to see, has there been natural attenuation, natural improvements where we may not need to go and spend quite as much money, or it might be the other case where we need to spend more. But, so that's going to be step one, is getting a really good understanding of what we're dealing with. But our estimates are 75%. Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you for that information. You know we're interested in these issues in Rutherford County.
Yes, sir. I do understand that. Thank you.
When do you expect to have your updated list and cost projections?
That's going to be a absolutely running, probably something we do periodically through the year. I don't think we've set any definite time frame of doing that. We'll be glad to compile that information periodically and get that to you if you'd like.
If you could do that, I
Yes,
think that
ma'am.
would be helpful, so that this time next year we can look back and see sort of what's been accomplished and where the assets need to be deployed going forward.
Yes, we're excited about doing that. We will do that.
And I guess an additional question, as there's less property available in our state because we've been very fortunate. We have a lot of interest in Tennessee from outside, internationally and nationally. And there are a lot of brownfield developments in areas like mine that could be used for something else, but they do require remediation. So if you could kind of help understand how that process would work. And I see, Commissioner, did you want to?
I wanted to lead into that question
Okay.
with, and you can look, downtown Nashville, Gulch, everywhere else, around the brownfield redevelopment around the state. The state has one of the best brownfield redevelopment programs out there. Basically, we're going in and cleaning those sites up, making them safe, putting them back into beneficial reuse for business, industry, and or green space recreational areas. And one of the reasons I want to take this question, because we're very fortunate to have, I think, one of the best environmental attorneys in the state working for us in Deputy Commissioner Young. And he worked in a number of, can I retract that from the record, please? But nevertheless,
It's
over the
too
South.
late. He's already put it in his performance
Okay.
review.
All right. Yeah. But he has worked around the Southeast United States, and I think he's got some tremendously valuable insights as just to how effective that program is here in Tennessee.
Yeah, the commissioner has made me blush at this point. Thank you for those nice comments. I'll be happy to elaborate on that with just a couple of points. Almost said, Your Honor. With just a couple of points. In the broader scale cleanup activity that we are looking at doing, one of the core principles that we have adopted is returning contaminated sites to economic viability. And you do that by employing the brownfield statute that this General Assembly passed. You do that by employing risk-based measures that look at what's the end use of the property, things like that. So we're excited about really exercising that opportunity there.
Thank you. Maybe you and I could have an offline conversation about a specific situation at a later date. If you could just give my office a call, I'd appreciate it.
Will do.
Thank you. Representative Gillespie, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Back to West Tennessee. This involves the West Tennessee River Basin Authority. In y'all's budget, there's $25 million non-recurring in state funding to match some federal funding from the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers for some maintenance projects. However, the department's only requested about $800,000. Can you elaborate on just why that match isn't there? And can you just explain a little bit more what's going on?
Certainly. That is in West Tennessee. The West Tennessee River Basin Authority is administratively attached to our department. They are very much like a mini U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. And there are three very large ongoing projects in West Tennessee. One of those is running Reelfoot Bayou, which comes out of Reelfoot Lake and discharges into the Obion River, not the Obion, as many folks might say. I get my West Tennessee friends checking me there. But so a huge project that is very important to the economy of Lake, Obion, and Dyer counties. which would help with agricultural production, yet also bring in opportunities for duck hunting, things of that nature. And another project. So the next one is North Fayette County, which is, north of Somerville, Oakland, right there in Blue Oval City sweet spot. And that has to do with stabilization of Cypress Creek. If you could imagine it like a mini Grand Canyon in West Tennessee that threatens bridges and gas pipelines and things of that nature. So, and one other, Piney Creek, which is down in Hardeman County, another distressed, I think it's at risk now. The Hatchie River is home of some of the most valuable bottomland hardwood timber in the country. That sand can choke out the trees and kill timber industry. I think it's Royal Oak Charcoal down there now, Leader Gant, and some others. So we had the opportunity to project ahead 2 or 3 years, and these are either it's 65-35 or 75-25. I could go get into the details of each of the projects that would vary how the money's spent, but this would carry those projects through, and the state would realize investing $25 million and in return get about 70 to $100 million from the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers.
Representative Gillespie, you have a follow-up?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to make sure I heard that last part correctly. You're saying over the next 3 or 4 years that match will be taking place?
Probably not over the next parts of it for the next 3 or 4, but probably the running real foot may take a little longer just because of the magnitude of the project. Maybe like a 5 or 6, but at least that the Basin Authority is able to enter into that federal cooperative service agreement with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers to move that forward. And it shows that the state of Tennessee is serious about these projects.
Representative Freeman, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I've got a couple of separate questions. The first one is last year, 2 years ago, with the special sessions, they all kind of run together. We talked about the coal primacy going back to you guys. Can you talk a little bit about how that is working and specifically what that department now looks like and what revenue looks like and what costs look like? Can you dig into that?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Representative, for the question. And what I'll try to do is kind of tell you a little bit about what we're structurally doing and some of the efforts that we've made. And then, Scott, if you could piggyback on that with some information about the finances, I think that would answer the questions. So we have actually made good progress carrying out the directives of the General Assembly to assume primacy. We are currently in negotiations with the federal government, the Office of Surface Mining right now to get approval for our rules, things like that we would need to have in place to have an equivalent program that the federal government could approve. That's going to be an ongoing process. We are also, we have created a new division, if you will, structural framework to house this new work that's coming in. We've got a new director, deputy director. We are in the process of staffing up. In fact, you'll see number 14 on our list. It's really a zero entry, but it's for 6 positions that were already contemplated during the prior legislation. We just need approval for those in order to be able to move forward. Currently, I believe we're only spending the federal development grant monies. In other words, I don't think we are dipping into any of the General Assembly obligated monies yet. And I think that is a yearly anticipated to be a budget of 871, maybe a little bit more. Okay. So I've exhausted my general knowledge. Scott, if you want to add any color to that, feel free.
Sure. So
If you would, for the record, just identify yourself.
sure.
Please.
Hi, I'm Scott Grammer. I'm the budget director for the department. Yes. So Greg, you're exactly right. So we have 871 in the budget right now for this upcoming year. We don't anticipate spending all of that money because we're still on the development grant from the federal government right now. But we do have money in the budget to start to continue that effort.
And just a follow up. So currently it's still with the surface mining and the federal level until it reverts back to us. Is that correct?
That is correct. We'll have to make an equivalency demonstration of, you have to have the regulatory legal wherewithal, you have to have the financial wherewithal to be able to actually obtain primacy. Right now, that is still at the federal government. It will, take a while for us to make that demonstration, and it's a negotiated demonstration. They may see things in our rules that they want differently, and we negotiate.
Thank you. And second unrelated question. So in fiscal year 22, you received about $15 million for some IT modernization. Can you provide an update on how these are going to be utilized and if this is enough to cover all the technology needs of the department?
I can take that one. It's that was coming in really having a look at TDEC's IT systems early on. I think one of my favorite lines, Senator Bowling put it, sounds like to me you're trying to put an 8-lane interstate on a big trail. And so we had to pull back and really look at that. And there were some needs that were identified in a 2018 audit. And I know you're familiar with our department. We have so many different divisions and 280 different databases that don't communicate well with one another. So we saw this as a huge need, and it also has to do with revenue collection from our department. Whereas whoever we're permitting, they pay fees. We do inspections, they pay fees, and that's the way that we're able to pay for many of our functions. So there were a lot of holes that were there, and at the time we asked for 15 million. We were like, it might be 12, it might be 18. We don't really know, but we've got to get started with this process. So we've gone through and are mapping the processes and working with STS, State Strategic Solutions, and working through that now. We have Ernst & Young is working with us on mapping some processes. So I feel really good about where we're going. I think we start to see some significant changes going forward. To answer your question, is that enough? We think so, but as technology evolves over time, is that the end of the project, or is this just, ongoing maintenance of that particular system? But I feel really good about where we are in the progress that we're making.
Chairman Williams, you're recognized.
Thank you, commissioners, and thank you for good work. Obviously, really excited about what's going on in parks. We spent a little bit of money in the last couple of years, and so got to see some new things come online at Cummins, Fall Creek Falls, things close to my district, which is great. I did notice that in the budget, though, there's $500,000 in new recurring revenue as it relates to marketing of our state parks. I guess the question is can you give us an example of what some of that monies might be used for, and do you coordinate with tourism to make sure that there's not an overlap there?
Yeah, thank you, Representative. Appreciate that. And there's a lot of good things going on in and near your district, and we're really excited about the parks. I'm going to get to the last part of your question first. We probably, from my understanding, obviously I wasn't here before, we have one of the best relationships with tourism I think that we've ever had, or at least let me just say it's very, very good. The Commissioner of Tourism and I go back a long way, long before we were in government. And so we've been working with them, and we meet with them a lot on outdoor recreation and some of the initiatives that we're working on. So there's a lot of coordination there. As far as the marketing budget's concerned, so we Tennessee State Parks generates slightly less, just almost half of our operating budget. We generate that through our hospitality venues such as the lodges and cabins and campgrounds and those types of things. So that's what we have to do in order to keep running. And we've been doing that on a marketing budget. We've been generating about $45 million a year on a marketing budget of about $250,000. So very low marketing budget. Our marketing team is incredible.
two things with the new marketing money that you're referring to. One is we're going to bump that budget a little bit. And so we're going to try to help that. And we've got some new ends coming online. We want to make sure that those ends get the kind of ROI that the General Assembly expects from all the money that's been put into those new inns and lodges and all the campgrounds and everything else. So we need some marketing money to make sure that we're able to deliver. And so that's about $250,000 will go toward that. That's a very small investment for the literally over $100 million that we're putting into these facilities. The other piece of that, another piece of that amount is that we have to develop a new website. Our website was developed in 2013. And so that is ancient in today's terms for a website. We have to develop a new website. That's again, if we're going to get the kind of return on investment that we need, we have to do that website. What that's going to mean is we need some more development, but we also need some more hosting resources, and we're going to need more sophisticated hosting for that. And so there's going to be some more expense for that. So those are really the two things that's going to be used for. I hope that answered your question.
It does. It does. I'm really excited too. I got an email or text, I guess, the other day about a new retail component where you're doing some new merch and stuff at state parks. I know this is kind of a huge deal. I know when I travel to other states, their state parks, you're always looking for some kind of merch to take home and make it your own. So I think that is one of the places where we've lacked in the past, and I think it's a good opportunity for us to do that.
If I may, we just put our Tennessee State Parks gift shop online. Each of you will want a Tennessee State Parks hat, mug, and T-shirt, and you are welcome to go there and buy as many for you and all your friends at any time that you'd like.
Yes, I think a portion of all that goes to Cummins Falls. But the $224 million capital this year, I guess it's great that we're able to spend more money in our parks. It really, through COVID, was kind of one of those things with our parks open where we were able to kind of keep tourism, even though maybe not overnight, but also keep people outside and keep them moving, which is, I think, an important component to overall health of our state, not just economically, but our health and mental health as well. I guess the question is, how long do you think it'll take you to run through that number? Is it something that's going to take multiple years to do it? Because it is a bigger number than you've seen in the past.
Yes, thank you for that. It will take a good while to run through that. $224 million includes not only the capital improvements, which are improvements that we're making to some of our facilities, but it also includes some new facilities, which are, I'm sorry, those are capital improvements. Capital maintenance are the improvements to facilities. So it includes that. But what I'm really excited about, it also includes the money that we need to eliminate all of our small dollar deferred maintenance in our parks, where when we came in, it was $82 million. We're going to eliminate that, but it's going to take a little while. We don't have the resources today to be able to do all of that. And frankly, all of that also has to go through general services. And I think they've gotten $3 billion in capital that they have to deal with now, or some huge number. So it's going to take a little while to work through that, but it's going to make our parks so much better and so much more modern for our Tennessee citizens, and an even greater impact to tourism for Tennessee, which if you don't know, because I tell everybody, Tennessee State Parks have a $2.1 billion impact on Tennessee and create 15,000 jobs in the state. So it's a good investment.
Yeah, thank you. One last question, Chairman. I did notice as a kid growing up in Upper East Tennessee, spent a lot of time at Duck Island there, Warriors Pass State Park, and I noticed that you're closing that pool and some other pools. Is it the guys of the department to continue to shut down all these pools and do something different? Is it the liability too great, or is it the maintenance? Or we're spending a lot of money there. I just wondered, pools in the 80s. Pools was where it was at. So I don't know if that's the case now, but just your thoughts on pools.
I'll build on what I said a little while ago, and a lot of these pools are very old, and the maintenance is increasing on them. At Warriors Pass specifically, it is an old pool where I don't have the exact numbers with me, but the visitation was declining. There are some pools nearby because it's near a major metropolitan area.
Mm-hmm.
So there are pools nearby, and we put a lot of money into Warriors Path, and we're looking at some other things as well. So that park is it's a beautiful park, and we're trying to continue to invest in that park, as we are, as you noted, all across our park system. We're doing everything we can to make these parks the very best they can possibly be for our citizens.
Thank you, Commissioner. I will take that as to mean that the pool was old and not I'm old, but I appreciate your work in this space. It's really exciting to see what we're doing in state parks. One of the first things I was able to participate in was Cummins Falls when I first got elected. It's something that's very passionate about it, and it really does change the quality of life of our state. Our state parks do, and so I look forward to working with you to continue that in the future. Thanks.
I would just point out that old is a relative term. It all depends on the perspective and the eye of the beholder. Thank you, Commissioner. I know that we've had some conversation here today already on some of these issues, but one of the things that we haven't touched on that's really important to me, and that's the $1.35 billion that the department has been allocated for water and wastewater infrastructure. I know that the department is planning for $1 billion of that to be granted non-competitive grants to communities, and then another $350 million in state-initiated projects that have a priority. Can you help us? And I'm hopeful that my communities in my district and the communities across the state are taking advantage of leveraging not only these dollars, but the dollars that they have been given directly to really make some long-term investments and improvements in stormwater, sewer, and all of these large projects where we have aging infrastructure in place. The water loss issue has been, something that we've dealt with and talked about with other agencies before us, but it's a huge loss to the economy each year and a cost to our taxpayers and ratepayers. So just kind of give us an update on where we are with that program, how you see that playing out, and whether or not our communities are, how actively they are, participating or applying for these grants.
Well, Chairman Williams gave me a great example that I can perhaps relate here. Most of this infrastructure is older than the pools. And it's one of the type things that we don't see and we don't like to think about. It's not a nice, shiny new bridge. We have $15 billion of drinking water and wastewater needs in the state of Tennessee. And this 1.35 billion plus the 2.2 that went to the community.
Commissioner, could you say that again, just for the record, to make sure everybody understands what the needs are versus what the monies that we're talking about?
And Madam Chair, I think that $15 billion number is going to go up as we start to look into this. But our infrastructure is old, and this is one of the most critical components for, when you turn on your tap water in the morning, you expect it to be safe. When waste leaves a facility, you expect it to be cleaned up before it is returned to the environment. So we have a great team that is working on this, and we are going to be starting grant development workshops in late March, April 4th. With the communities. We have been doing extensive outreach over the past few weeks. We're working with the Fiscal Stimulus Accountability Group. We have we call it the Water Infrastructure Advisory Committee, which is made up of a variety of stakeholders. So we are working very hard to get local communities to utilize the money that they have to match the state dollars or to co-fund these projects so they can get the maximum benefit out of that. We will start looking at the use or the requirements for the state strategic dollars. But we're basically trying to get these communities to invest the money where it's most strategic and is going to provide the best return on investment. I can go into more detail, or will that suffice?
Again, I think we're just going to rely on you. And I think if you believe it would be beneficial for members of this body to encourage their local municipalities and local county governments to participate, or utility districts, then certainly if you could let us know, we would be, I think I could speak for everyone and be happy to encourage them to do that.
Yes, madam, if I may comment briefly, the answer is absolutely yes. Your involvement, your local knowledge, your ability to help us navigate some of the potential rivalries or issues that you find when it comes to water systems is absolutely critical. We've already brought several General Assemblies members in on those discussions, and we hope to be able to rely on y'all going forward. Thank you already for doing that.
I'm certain this isn't true, but there might be sometimes, rarely, that we would be viewed as part of the problem. So we would like, particularly in this instance, to be a part of the solution and to help in any way we can to. Again, this is an unprecedented opportunity. It's perhaps 1/15 of the needs that are out there, but it's $1.35 billion that we would not have otherwise. And just want to make sure, I think all of us do, that we use it in the way that is most beneficial long-term for Tennessee taxpayers.
Yes, ma'am.
Leader Camper.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for your presentation. I think I missed part of it, so I would appreciate if I could get follow-up on the Brownfields conversation.
Yes, ma'am.
And talk more about the Memphis area regional mega site and what we're seeing there with the 37 employees. Also, could you give an update on Meiman Park? What's going on there? The boat ramp used to be a thing that Barbara Cooper would champion every year, and she want to know what's happening with that boat ramp. So I need to find out about the boat ramp.
I believe that boat ramp is always controversial.
Mhm.
It's a problem because of the way it is there, as I understand it, and it's not our boat ramp.
I know.
So it's not, so I'll just tell you what I understand.
Mhm.
Not necessarily what I know, is that the way the river flows around that, it tends to build up underneath, and then the water goes up and the water goes down. It's hard to get it cleaned out and keep it operational. It's not our boat ramp. And so that's about what I know about it, but it is always talked about.
Thank you for that response, because I know she calls you all a lot about it, and y'all been very responsive to her. She knows it's not yours, but she still want to make sure that all eyes are on the boat ramp. So I thank you and appreciate you for that. Mr. Commissioner, could you talk to us a little bit about the increase in visitation to our parks? Have we seen a huge uptick, or I know we have a marketing strategy to bring more, but could you talk to some of that?
Be glad to. Thank you. We've had during COVID, we had a huge influx of people that wanted to get out. If you ever had small kids, you'll understand the need and the desire to get out of the house and go to state parks. Everybody showed up at our state parks during that time, and our state parks were kind of Tennessee's therapist during COVID. So we had a huge increase over the last. We started doing an economic impact report, and we're at $2.1 billion impact on the state of Tennessee, 15,000 jobs. But more importantly, people are coming. Now, we kind of separate the difference between people that come to our parks and people that come to spend the night at our parks. So our parks, I want to just say thank you all for the support of our parks. We've heard a lot of that today. But you probably you may not know that our parks are free for people to go to. And that's really important. And we take that for granted in Tennessee because it's always been that way. But the truth is that our state parks we're only one of 7 systems in the country, 7 state park systems in the country where it's still free to go to the park. Everybody else charges fees. So people are coming to our parks and we want them there. What the marketing money is for the people that come and spend the night in our campgrounds, cabins, lodges, and those types of places. That's where we get the revenue, because we don't charge entry fees. That's where we get the revenue to keep our state parks operating. And that's where we're asking for that marketing revenue.
Leader Camper.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I agree with you. I've been on the website to try to book and navigate for a family reunion, so it definitely needs some work. And so I'm glad that that's where you want to put the money to get the people here. It's challenging at times, but like you said, it was 2013 the last time it was updated.
And somebody, so call me.
But
seriously, but what I'm saying, the website does need work, but we also have a group a group, somebody that works with our groups, and we can
Mhm.
help you with groups because that's a little bit of a different animal, and we'll help you with that.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
I don't have any other questioners on my list. I think you all are the beneficiary of the fact that we've been doing this for a long time. Um, So again, we thank you for coming today and for answering our questions. And if you will just give us the information that we requested in a follow-up periodically, that would be great. And again, thanks for being here. Thanks for what you do. And we appreciate the relook at the state park issue and the pools and all that, because there's not in my district, but in my area, there's certainly interest in a particular one. And I know that other members have, they're getting a lot of pressure at home for some of these pools. So we thank you for being willing to go back and take a relook in some cases. Have a good rest of your day.
Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Happy Monday. While we have members interacting with our previous and next presenters, I would ask the Historical Commission to come forward, be taking your place at the tables, please.
How does this one work? See, testing. That's on. Good. So everybody's
Good afternoon. Director McIntyre and team, thank you for being here, and thank you for being on deck a little bit early, and we will begin early, and hopefully that will release you a few minutes early as well. So with that, Commissioner McIntyre, if you want to begin your presentation.
Well, good afternoon. Thank you, Chair Hazelwood, members of the committee. It's great to be here. I'm Patrick McIntyre. I'm Director of the Tennessee Historical Commission. And to my left is Linda Wynn, our Assistant Director for State Programs, who's now in her 47th year of service to our office. So a wonderful part of our work. To my right is Holly Barnett, our relatively new, as in 2 or 3 months now, Assistant Director for Federal Programs, but she's not new to our office. She's been with us 5 or 6 years, and she's our Deputy State Preservation Officer. And then next to her is Dan Brown, who is our State Historic Sites Program Director. Our Chair, Dorita Coleman-Williams of Memphis, sends her regards. She's not able to be with us today, but I'm going to try to adhere to the time frame that you all were so good in expressing and just run through things quickly. We're now in our 103rd year of existence, and our duties consist of both state and federally mandated programs. We're the Tennessee State Historic Preservation Office, and so we provide grants, technical assistance, and help citizens conserve their unique heritage. We support community
revitalization and economic development through tourism, through promoting neighborhood and downtown protections. We've worked with developers to facilitate over $1.5 billion in federal historic tax credit certified projects, which have benefited over 1,000 Tennessee buildings since that program started. There are over almost 45,000 resources listed in our state on the National Register of Historic Places, which we help facilitate with the National Park Service being the final entity approving. We're real pleased because just in January, our 50th certified local government in Tennessee, Mount Pleasant, enrolled in the program. There were about 32 when I got here. These communities receive increased technical assistance. They have local historic zoning commissions and meet other kind of procedural benchmarks that allow them to participate in the program. They get a little more access to our federal historic preservation funding that we give out as grants each year. On the state side, as you all probably know, since they're in your district and everywhere in the state, there's about 2,000 historic markers. And then we have the Tennessee Wars Commission, which is a division of our office, which has helped conserve nearly 8,000 acres since it started in 1994 with military heritage sites associated from the time of the French and Indian War through the Civil War. Our proposed governor's budget this year for 22-23 rather is for $4.257 million with a additional request of $500,000 for our historic properties maintenance fund, which is for our state historic sites. We have 17 state historic sites under our jurisdiction with some 110 buildings valued at over $75 million that have been administered for years by a staff of one. Of course, they're all administered, save for one that's part of a state park, by independent 501c3 nonprofits, but we've just got one person in-house to oversee the maintenance and capital budget. So we're delighted that there's a second position included in the governor's budget, which will help us build the program. We also see that as a way to help implement a grant program for our office, the Historic Property Lands Acquisition Fund grant program that is a portion, that's the same kind of funding source that the Civil War Sites Preservation Fund has that's on your green sheets, but we really need to get funding out on that. So this is going to help us do that. We also requested and had funded in the governor's budget a attorney position, an assistant counsel to help us with our ongoing and increasing legal work. That was included. We're very grateful for that, and that is much needed as well. Our third request, which is actually our top request, was based on a reclassification study that we did with our colleagues in the Division of Archaeology, and we requested a reclassification from these historic preservation specialist positions to cultural resource consultant positions with the eye towards long-term recruitment and retention of our existing staff. We've lost about 8 staff in the past 5 years. When you think that's a small office of 18, that's a large number. The starting salary for our equivalent office here in town, the Metro Historical Commission, is almost $20,000 a year higher now. And we all know what the cost of living is around here. So we didn't get that funded, but we're hopeful that that could be possibly included. It's actually a minimal cost, less than one position for state recurring funding. It would be $57,000 a year in recurring state funding, which we would match with $86,000 of our federal funds, which we get each year. We get about $1 million in federal funds recurring each year from the Federal Historic Preservation Fund. So we also were very fortunate and appreciative that the capital budget request this year included 2 crucial projects, which included $8.8 million at Cragfont State Historic Site in Castilian Springs. That'll restore the late 1790s main house, as well as add event space, a pavilion, and do some great things with the grounds that has been long awaited. And then we're especially pleased also that there's $3 million in the budget to build the Carter House State Historic Site Visitor Center in Franklin. There was a budget shortfall a few years ago that was designed, went out to bid, and there was a funding shortfall. This is our most visited state historic site. That'll allow us to serve those over 50,000 plus people a year that go there and be one for the ages. So that's it in a nutshell. I can go listing by listing, et cetera, but I want to be respectful of your time and answer any questions you have. So thank you.
Well, thank you. We appreciate that very much. We do have a number of questions, so we'll go straight there. And we'll begin with a gentleman that you may have met before, and that's Chairman Whitson.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair Lady. Again, I just want to tell you, Patrick and Dan, I enjoyed so much working with you guys over the year, and I appreciate all you do for our state to preserve our historical heritage, and look forward to meeting the other members of the staff. Couple questions. One, we just recently understand $3 million has been proposed for the new visitor center at the Carter House, which is my understanding will help overcome the inflation problems we had with the previous allocation for the new visitor center. And is the Carter House still the most visited state historical site?
Yes, sir. That's correct. It still is. And of course, it's got a great management entity.
That's called asking a question you know the answer to.
Well,
Interstate
it is in the
proximity,
middle of my
everything
district.
helps.
I'm sorry, Patrick.
Well, I was just, yes.
Okay.
About that.
But also, I noticed $9 million for renovations for a new pavilion at the Craig Front site in Sumner County. Can you give us some details on that, please?
Yeah, and Dan can fill in some of the gaps. This mainly is sort of a generational restoration of that main house, General Winchester's house that, well, it was actually a hay barn in the 50s when the state purchased that, if you can believe it. If you ever go up there, and I hope you all have had a chance to see it. If not, I strongly ask that you do. And it's a treasure, really. And it's going to be restoring the main house as well as adding a pavilion, which is event space that they have needed, and then probably include, some space for other functions like multi-purpose, whether it's they don't really have office space up there or things like that. So there's things that we can kind of include in that. And then I know there's a lot of work on the grounds too. And Dan, you can elaborate on anything if I. That happened to me last time. If the red button's on, it's on.
Good. Okay. I apologize. The pavilion that's going to be built there in sort of an activity center, all the sites generate a large percentage of their own funds. It's the way that we've set up all the state historic sites, the way the legislature set them up, so that they depend upon these facilities to be able to function and actually take in the funds that they need to operate. So they're very limited in what they can do with the facilities that they have. So this is pushing them to a new level. This also is directly adjacent to 3 other sites there, Wynwood and Hawthorne Hill, and then Castilian Mounds area, which is all areas that will benefit from this as well. So, but the main house is going to get a complete rehabilitation. And then there are some, the connecting garden there it needs some rehabilitation as well. So those are the primary projects.
And I understand that because of the cost of construction now and inflation, that's the $9 million will be sufficient for that.
We've worked very closely with Doug Freeman over in Stream. I don't know how familiar you are with him. And particularly in the last 2 or 3 years, I've been with the program 6 years now. This has been a real focus of what we're doing now. It is obviously an extraordinary amount of money, but in that have been what we feel are very carefully calculated contingencies that are going to allow for inflation and increased prices. And Doug and I work very closely, Patrick and I work very closely with Doug every year for this. And this one in particular, we worked we focused on this project to make sure that we'll have the money for that. And we don't get into the situation that actually prompted what happened with that project there at the Carter House has prompted this kind of focus and effort on our part.
Well, thank you. And just for the record, we are very proud of the state historical site there in Franklin, and we don't have a airport, we don't have a state park, we don't have a state prison, and we don't have a lake in Williamson County. So we are very proud of our state historical site. My next question is, in 2018, the Historical Cemetery Advisory was created for the purpose of studying protections and preservation efforts for cemeteries of historical importance and significance. Can the commission provide an update on the actions and findings of the advisory committee in the statewide survey of historical cemeteries it was created?
Yes, thank you very much. That resulted in a position for our office, which was fantastic. And there were 2 requirements of that legislation. Really, one was to issue a report on possible ways that, and this was a committee that was formed as part of that as well, to issue a report on the ways in which cemetery laws might be changed or enhanced to further the protection thereof. And so that report came out at the end of 2020 in accordance with the requirements, and is posted on our website. So I encourage you all to read that if you haven't done that already. As part of that program as well, there's a database that was demonstrated. It's online now, and I'm not sure if it's accessible to the general public yet, but it's right about there. It was demonstrated at our most recent meeting last month. There's over 32,000 cemeteries plotted into GIS using existing and other means to kind of, they're plotted on maps, and they have overlays in a way that not only do they identify, they're there for the general public, genealogists, people like me, they're just interested in history, but they're going to help protect some of these from development with where a developer goes in, doesn't know they're there, and starts working without knowing that, or that kind of thing. And so we see that as an especially useful tool. And our survey, our cemetery coordinator has already gone out and helped with some issues that have come up where, people have encountered cemeteries. And I know down in Rutherford County, Representative Sparks can probably speak to that. We've had some meetings down there, and there's a lot of good work going on that as well. So we think that this is right on track. There's some workshops that have been brought in. We've got two coming up rather soon on cemetery preservation workshops, and we're excited about what we brought, that dimension that's been brought to that, because we get a lot of calls, as you can imagine, on cemeteries with people being concerned about them, and there does need to be an increase in the protection of particularly grave markers. Aren't always accommodated, whereas grave desecration of the grave itself is illegal, but there's some gray areas with the markers, et cetera. So we look forward to some legislation coming out from that report. So.
Representative Lynn.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Hi, thank you for being with us today. I have a question. Your budget estimated $1 million in revenue from the real estate transfer funds for battlefield protection, but actual collections were $7 million. We realize these funds are used to provide grants to nonprofits to match federal and other funds. Can the commission provide more information on the grant process to us, and how many applications are generally received each year? How many grants are awarded? The average grant award amounts? Do you award all of the money, all the revenues collected, or are some kept in reserve? Or
Thank you, Representative Lynn. Yes, we've had some really good times associated with the real estate transfer tax, particularly in the past year, and that the lion's share of that, as you may recall from the enabling legislation, does go to the Civil War Sites Preservation Fund, and then a smaller portion, a little over 30%, goes to what I alluded to earlier, the Historic Property Lands Acquisition Fund. So with all of this, you have to have a willing seller, and then you have to have the applicants make applicant, and then make the application. And this is set out to match federal funding from American Battlefield Protection Program funding. And so there's kind of a whole system in place. So yes, we do have reserve funds, because sometimes you're going to have, particularly in this past year, money that exceeds the applications. I think we got something like $564,000 from 2 applications that were done in the past year, and then we just had another round that went through at this last meeting. So we do have a surplus in funding for that, and we made the largest one, I think, was, I want to misspeak, but there was one project for Rutherford County where we were able to protect over 40 acres of the Stones River battlefield. Is that 2-3 million? I should remember that offhand, but it was the largest one we'd made. So, and that was also the largest tract of property that had been protected since that National Battlefield Park was created in 1960 or thereabouts. So it's like a lot of things, something may come up next year that's going to be a larger project. It might be next to Shiloh, but these can only be funded, or the legislation is pretty tight on that. There's the 38 battlefields that the National Park Service planning study said were eligible for funding through the American Battlefield Protection Program. So that captures a lot of them, but there were over 1,000 engagements in Tennessee, and we can't fund any but the top 38. So that's another kind of, I guess, limitation, if you will, on utilizing that fund. But it's been a tremendous success for the places that have benefited from it, and we see it as a real asset with permanently protecting these places that would otherwise be lost to development. So.
Representative Lynn.
how many grants were issued last year?
Well, in the past year, there were 2. I've got my notes here. And I apologize, because our Wars Commission program director wanted to be here today, Nina Skull, and she wasn't able to be here. So So let's see, yeah, 21, 22, the Braddock tract at Chattanooga, Wauhatchie, 292,000, and the Burns tract there was 348. So that may add up to a little more, but again, there weren't, as I recall, and Ms. Winkin, we funded the applications that were received that met, because they were the ones that met the requirements. There weren't applications sitting on the table that didn't get funded because we're in a position where we did have more money available. So, yeah. And I found it. My poor notes. 2021 was actually 3. So Wauhatchie Battlefield, Shiloh Battlefield, and Parker's Crossroads. So, and that did add up to 564,000 total. So there were 3 projects and not 2. I apologize.
Representative Lynn, you had a follow-up?
Yes, I do. Thank you, Madam Chair. So out of the $7 million in collections, there was only a little over 500,000 distributed.
Well, and I'm not sure that balance was there. I mean, that the number that you're quoting, I believe, includes what's been added in at the end of because it comes in at the end of the fiscal year, like as it responds. So yes, but it's going to be based on the applications received and the qualifying projects. So that would be correct.
To follow up on that, you mentioned the Wauhatchie Battlefield, and Browns Ferry is an area where that property was purchased maybe 2 years ago. Time flies. But one of the things, the discussions, we had a park ranger there at the dedication who did an interpretation of what happened, because when I go and look at it, I just see the river and some embankments, and it's like, okay. So I think in order to make it meaningful, you have to have some kind of interpretation, whether that's with someone on site or, plaques for people to read, that sort of thing. So where do we stand, not just buying the property, but actually making it accessible and I guess making it meaningful for Tennesseans or people from other states who want to visit?
Well, and that's a great question. And as you know well from being down there, there are several tracks that have been preserved as part of that. And the long-term plans are to be either a part of the battlefield proper through the Park Service, or just to be conserved with the signage and things you say with the friends of the park there who are helping lead that effort. So as you'll recall, we actually were able to purchase Brown's Tavern, the Cherokee Associated Tavern. Brown's Ferry itself is not only the side of that Wauhatchie battlefield, but that was a departure point on the Trail of Tears. So there's some incredible overlapping values there. So, I mean, that's a process that's ongoing, and that's going to be dependent as much on the local partners continuing to work on getting that transition down there. But we do have money through our grants program if they want to apply to our Wars Commission for signage or for interpretive panels like that. And so all of these projects work because just the staffing pattern we have, we've got to rely on local partners to take on these responsibilities, whether it's like at Parker's Crossroads, where you have the city government is the primary caretaker of that battlefield and operates it, or Camp Blunt in Fayetteville, which is a part of the Wars Commission program, where the city of Fayetteville is the primary caretaker. We're working on Salem Battlefield right now outside of Jackson, Tennessee, which would be the same kind of thing, would be a part of the county park system if it goes through. So, so again, we depend on our local partners and people like that to do the lion's share of that, since we don't have, like our friends, our colleagues at TDEC with park rangers and the staffing pattern that allows us to staff those. But we would be happy to to staff them if circumstances allowed. But I hope that helps answer the
Well,
question.
we have this largesse in our coffers, so I think we're not ever short of creative ways to spend dollars. So again, I think many of us may be going back home and suggesting that grant requests get underway. Representative Sexton, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have 4 questions, and they have to do with the Land Acquisition Fund. I think your office was budgeted for $582,000, but you actually received $2.8 million, and I think your reserves are $5.4 million. Is that correct?
That is correct. So
What-
oh, sorry, go ahead.
What was the last land acquisition that was made utilizing these funds?
Well, it's interesting because, as you know, that went from a little over 2 million to 5.4 million. And again, we had an unprecedented year, as Representative Lynn talked about, with an influx of funding into that. So that enabling legislation does several things. It allows us to work, if we so wanted to make capital improvements to our own sites, we could do that. We could acquire properties that buffer our properties, or just acquire new state sites in-house. If that happens, you could lose or utilize $1 million or $1 million plus at the drop of a hat with that. Or it allows us to make grants to non-state owned properties. So the answer to the question is, it grew to such a large extent. We've not had any projects come up in the past couple of years since I've been here, which is 15 years. Next week, actually, we've had opportunities, and we bought buffer properties using other funding sources and things like that. We bought a couple of state properties. So it just hasn't been in this 3 or 4 years that something had come up, and then all of a sudden it grew to the point that a big part of this request, as I expressed, for the historic sites position, we'll be able to utilize a portion of that for grant funding and get that out to the communities. We have a very robust, mature federal historic preservation grant program that has given about 28 million, I think, Holly, since its inception years ago. And this would kind of be the same thing. We need to figure out how much of an allocation we do annually, but there's still that opportunity at any time where we might look at purchasing additional properties or buffer property or things like that come up. So, so that's the long version of saying that we're looking forward to getting this implemented, because again, it basically almost like doubled overnight. It's just been a big year for real estate transfer tax.
So is the answer then that you haven't made any acquisitions out of these funds?
That's right.
Okay. The next question would be, has the commission identified these sites for future acquisition? Have you, and how many, if you have?
No, we really haven't identified sites for future acquisition beyond like master plans around Castellian Springs that have identified like viewshed acquisitions or things like that. We don't have a roster of standing buildings out there. And again, that's based on a couple of factors, including just limitations on personnel and resources. We are dependent entirely on 501c3s, or in the case of the one state park at Sycamore Shoals, to operate and staff these places. So there were, I think, a couple that came on board early in my tenure, and then that opportunity may present itself again, but we do not have like a roster of places that we're out looking for as far as like to integrate into the state historic sites program, if that's your question.
Well, it kind of leads me into my final question. How do you determine these properties how do you prioritize what you're going to try to purchase?
Well, I think there's a couple of factors that come into play. One is the importance of the site within the context of the state's historic development. That's kind of the preliminary guiding thing. If it's National Register listed or eligible, certainly if it's a National Historic Landmark, which is the highest level of significance in the state, we have, as I said, over 44,000 places on the National Register of Historic Places. We've got about 30 National Historic Landmarks. So that puts us at the level of a Hermitage or the Carter House or Wynwood or Graceland, quite frankly, is one, as well as the state capitol. So there would be sort of a keystone character defining resource, or there's an opportunity for tourism development with a local entity, like a historic property that would have a high degree of public access and long-term support and sustainability. So, so those are the kind of factors that would go into it. We're always ready to consider things like as they come up, but ideally we have to be concerned about whether we grow the footprint of our agency without the resources to manage that. So, as I'm sure everybody here would probably agree on either side of me.
I want to thank you for your work, because I think it's extremely important, and I wish we could do a lot more in the way of preserving our history. And at some time, I would like to speak to you about the area that I'm from, Granger County. Bean Station in particular was crossroads to the south. And there's some very important sites there. One being the Bean Station Tavern, where Abraham Lincoln's mother once worked. And TVA, when they flooded the river, they kept those logs and were supposed to put it back together. And we've been trying for umpteen years to get that done. Come to find it
Right.
out, the logs has been stolen and first one thing and another, but it needs to be restored. And the other thing is the State Springs Resort, which drew people from all over the world right there in Bean Station. The Vanderbilts and the Fords, and it was a huge, huge success. And as a matter of fact, there's Nashville publication that was advertising Tate Springs water for sale by the barrel. So we have a lot of history in that area, and at some point I'd like to talk to you about it. The first white baby was born in Bean Station. The first white baby in Tennessee was born in Bean Station, William Bean. So thank you for your work, and maybe we can sit down and talk sometime.
Thank you. We'd love to talk more. I've heard a little bit about several of those projects you mentioned, and
They're
we enjoyed
treasures.
it. Fantastic.
Representative Sparks.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair Lady. Commissioner McIntyre, appreciate you always taking the time out to come to my district. And but I was going to ask on this historic preservation specialist, the governor's budget includes 86,000 roughly for the full-time position of that specialist. I wanted to ask what all the workloads will this incur, and can this also include cemeteries and restorations and some of that? Can you speak to that new position?
Well, thank you very much, Representative Sparks. And this position is intended primarily for a second position in the State Historic Sites program, since Mr. Brown is over 110 buildings at 17 sites that go from Henning, Tennessee, which is, far west Tennessee, up to Elizabethton. He's stretched pretty thin. And so there are a lot of needs, whether that's helping administer the maintenance fund or looking at the capital projects, or we get into things just helping the management with questions of these sites or curatorial questions that come up. And so certainly cemeteries are a part of that. We're so lucky that we do have a full-time cemetery person, and Mr. Perry, who I know you work with a lot. But also, since this position would be administering these grants, that's certainly something where cemeteries can apply for that. And so I think that'd be one tangible way that cemeteries could be assisted through this. So.
Yes. On the last Friday, I met with a company. They develop 3D, like virtual reality, and they were showing me a project. It's National Parks Conservation Association, Medgar Evans' home down in Mississippi, and it was a 3D model. I guess they're restoring this home. But have y'all looked at VR technology, maybe at some of the battlefields in the future, to see, almost that? I don't know if you've studied this. It's some pretty neat stuff. Company Labaki I met with the other day, some of this virtual learning where you could literally be at the Medgar Evans home and see everything going on without having to be there. I mean, it's some pretty neat stuff. Have y'all ever discussed some of this long term?
I've been amazed. I had a visit to the National Park Service headquarters right before the COVID stuff hit 2 years ago, and was looking at how they are able to map these things in 3D, just like what you're talking about. And so our federal programs in particular are always at the cutting edge of that sort of thing. I don't know if Ms. Barnett, if you have any idea on that. That's expensive, but something that we would like to look more into. So
Definitely. For the record, your name and title, please.
I'm Holly Barn. Oh, I have the red light. Maybe I'll use Dan's. Oh, there we go. Excuse me. I'm Holly Barnett. I'm the Deputy State Historic Preservation Officer. And yes, we would love to look into using our federal grants to help document these resources in that way. But to my knowledge, no sites in Tennessee have yet been done that way with VR, but we would definitely love to look into that for the future.
Well, it's fascinating where they can use that 360-degree camera, and a student in a classroom can understand what Representative Sexton's talking about in Bean Station, and they can be in Memphis. Or students in my community can see the Medgraven home and see the bullet going through in the kitchen. It's some really detailed stuff. I mean, this is where things are going, but just want to plant that seed for y'all.
Sure.
And thank you for
It
the
would-
great
might
job
be good
y'all
for
are
the
doing.
state sites, definitely, to document them in that way, update.
We actually have one site, Marble Springs, that actually is doing a 3D display online that's accessible online. We had set that up as a training program for all of our sites, our 18 sites. But with the COVID, we haven't been able to do the training person to person. We've had to cancel it. We had it set up last year in about a half a day program to present it to the sites and show them. And I had the specialist coming in that does it, that did the Marble Springs program. And so they were going to come in and show them how to do it and then set it up. As soon as we anticipate this fall in September that we're going to be able to do in-person training again. And our number one priority for that is the 3D program. One of our top priorities that we do there. We have to
Yes,
do
sir.
Title VI and other things, but we're going to be doing a 3D training program this fall with all the historic sites.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Leader Camper, we have you, and then Chairman Whitson will wrap us up.
Thank you. I was about to leave. I got a 12:30, so thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to talk to you about the cemetery desecration. Somebody mentioned that as part of your responsibility. There's a cemetery down in Franklin that someone has called me about, Deckard. And I don't know if they know the proper way to get in touch with you all, or how you all would want us to have them contact you if they feel that it's being desecrated and no one locally is listening. So if we can follow up on that, I appreciate that. And then secondly, Madam Chair, with respect to the, you know what I'm talking about? Well.
Are you having a senior moment, Leader Camper?
I am.
Well, we'll go to Chairman Whitson, and then if it comes back to you, we
The
will.
markers.
Oh, all right.
The markers. You all have done a great job with the markers, and I know we appropriated funding to help exhaust the list that we have for the markers. Is there an update on that, or did I miss that when I walked out?
Well, we do have a very robust marker program that's been in place since 1949, and we have about 2,000 of them that are out there. And there were about 18 or 20 approved just at the last meeting, if I'm correct. So just 10 at the last meeting. Okay. See, it's my lunchtime too. So
I understand.
but we did have a lot about that many at the prior meeting. And so since day one, TDOT has been the go-to place through an agreement with us to put the markers up. We're currently in the midst of negotiating an agreement with them to kind of just codify after 73 years, the markers need to, that we have to have some kind of agreement whether we fund them to place the markers up. They've been doing it at their expense, and so we're working on that. Until that's worked out, we're not able to place any markers really at the moment. So we're hoping that gets worked out pretty soon, but we're looking at how we get some funding for that. So
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Chairman Whitson.
And I look forward to helping you working with TDOT on the marker program. My question, though, real quick, Madam Chairman, thank you, is to do with the Tennessee History for Kids program. Is that going to be funded again this year?
We don't fund them through our agency. We had a grant relationship with them for some years, and they do a fantastic job. And we funded several years of posters for highlighting historic Tennessee properties. They haven't come to us for grants in several years. So I'm not sure what entity, if they get an annual appropriation, it does not go through the Tennessee Historical Commission. But they're great folks, and I spoke to the director just the other day, and I had this interesting trivia question. I knew he would know the answer. So,
Well, Director McIntyre, thank you. We know we're keeping you from lunch and vice versa. So we thank you again for coming today and answering our questions. And if we have follow-up, then we'll get back in touch with you directly and for the committee as a whole. Committee, we are standing in recess, but we will be back at 3 o'clock this afternoon. Commissioner Ely will be here. It'll be another chance for you to really dig down into some F&A issues. So recess until 3 p.m.